You're unmuted.
That's the way to silence the crowd.
So Bob's not here this afternoon?
No.
Bob is not here this
Oh.
afternoon.
Okay. Oh.
I feel kind of isolated.
Come on over,
As you
Timmy.
should.
Come on.
Oh, it's all right.
Oh.
I know it's a stay away kind of thing.
All right, it's 1:30.
I'm not
Let's call
afraid.
this
You can
meeting
sit
to order. This is the Benzie County Board of Commissioners study session. Today is April 11th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Cunningham,
Here.
Janat,
Here.
Markey,
Here.
Nye,
Here.
Rollots excused, Sauer,
Here.
Worsakki.
Here.
Please rise if you are able and join me with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seated? We have an agenda before us. Would anybody like anything added?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Markey will support.
Motion and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And that opens our first public comment. Oh, minutes. No, there were no minutes.
There's no minutes on there.
There's no minutes on here.
Not on the agenda.
Oh,
There's
I'm
minutes to be
sorry.
approved.
But there are, yeah. That's all right. Okay, let's do a 4.5. And we have minutes from the last study session. March 28th.
And there was one correction on it that Commissioner Knott had pointed out, so I've made that.
Okay.
Just a typo.
Make the motion to approve as corrected or no? Okay.
Second. Motion and support. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Now I will open public comment. And then I will close public comment. Which gets us to our topics for discussion, trial balance review.
Some time ago, we started adding quarterly the trial balance review onto our meetings. Monthly, you do receive an 89-page document from me, which is the trial balance of all funds. And I did send that to you, I believe, last week. We didn't put it in the packet because it's 89 pages and you already get it in another fashion. So looking at the budget, we're actually doing quite well. I did note when I emailed it to you, the discrepancy in revenue for the general fund. That is an issue that Shelley is working on. When she posted journal entries as a result of the audit, the system did some sort of reversal, and so it shows a negative for tax revenue, which is not accurate. We've collected taxes. We're not at a negative $500,000 for taxes. So that's incorrect based on the reports, but I can't change the number. She has to do that. But overall, if you just want to look at the general fund, we're doing quite well. Right now, we're at about a 45% use of budgeted expenditures. And we're more than halfway through. Well, we're just about halfway through the year, maybe a little more. So overall, we're doing well. There are a few lines here and there that are, at 100% or closer to 100%. And that is for a variety of reasons. Sometimes if we have annual payments, they're just paid once a year, so they'd be at 100% right away. And then sometimes, we do miss the mark in our budgeting, and so we have to move funds around. But overall, from an overall standpoint, we're doing quite well in our budgeting for this year as far as expenditures versus what's been budgeted. So that's really great. Does anyone have any specific questions about the trial balance?
Oh, I'd like to spend some time on this.
Yeah, of course.
But I'll let others ask their questions first because it may answer some of mine.
Like you have the floor.
I got it, huh? Okay. First off, just from a, how I approach this so that I'll say overall, you're doing a really good job budgeting. You're doing a really good job of presenting it, okay? What I look for is I'm basically focused in on general fund
Mhm,
items, things that would be within your authority.
mhm.
And very first thing that I look at is, I look at the total category to see if you're over or under on budget. And so like right now, you're at about 50% through. So if you're between 45 and 55, it really doesn't concern me. Or if there's small dollar amounts, they don't concern me. Okay. With that said, and I know there's 89 pages here, we shouldn't have to do this again. This is the first time we really put this out there for discussion, right? So bear with me, folks. None of these are really that alarming, but I just want explanation so the next time I see it, I'll already have the answer to this. I don't know how it's the best way to direct you to this. This is, I'm on page 4. It's not on the PDF. Yeah, well, it's on the PDF. Or
Okay.
the account number is 964.
Is it 101, 136 or 142?
141
141.
964.
All right, reimbursement to Manistee.
So it looks like, we're halfway through the year, but we've not spent 50% of those
Mhm.
dollars. Does that mean that we're going to have an opportunity within our budget, or are we just behind on some payments?
So we depend on Manistee to invoice us. We don't, that's not an automatic send.
Okay,
And I was just gonna pull up general ledger now to see. My guess is we haven't received an invoice, and so that's why it looks that way. Because that's not one of those automatic payments. We depend on them to send us an actual invoice.
okay. All right, so
So,
we know that there's not going to be any opportunity there that eventually will get spent.
Most likely, yes.
And throughout the trial balance, you'll have a category of contracted services. I'm only going to touch on this once, okay?
Mhm.
So if you look just slightly below that to 172,800,
Okay, yep.
you were at about 90%
Mhm.
spent on that.
Mhm.
Well, give me an example of what that might be.
Well, hold on just a minute. I'm gonna pull it up. The Manistee, they've only invoiced us through January, so that's why that percentage is so much lower.
Okay, are they they do it once a quarter?
No, sometimes it's every month and then maybe it's 2 months late. It's just their process that I think sometimes they might get a little behind.
Got it.
So going now to the contracted services. So that one, a lot of those contracted services, let's see here. We had some federal e-filing for the taxes. And then broadband, actually, the feasibility study that you guys entered into a contract just before I got here, we finally got the bill. And so that came out of there. So that was a big lump sum as well. So
That probably is it then, at 37.8.
yeah, there shouldn't be really anything else coming out of there unless there's something that's just not on the top of my head right now. But the majority of that was to merit for the survey for broadband.
So the service may have been provided, and because it was limited in scope, we pay it, we're done for the year.
Correct.
Doesn't suggest that we're ahead or behind.
Correct. So we budgeted 40,000 because I think that was the original number that you guys had approved.
Right.
But then they ended up only actually billing us 37 and change. They gave us a little bit of a break,
So we're gonna pick up about $5,000 there.
potentially.
We should be done with the billing,
We
right?
should be, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm moving now to page 5. And I'm looking, the one that's caught my attention was 257,703.
.00.
Is this equalization?
So it says salary department head.
So this is the equalization department headline. That one looks really funny and off because of the situation we're in with contracting with Polly, but then promoting Brianne. Then there's a shortness in that office. So all of those salary lines are gonna end up needing to be, well, except for Trish, but they're gonna need to be adjusted because of the contracted service and the gap of employment of people. And so that one's it was unpredicted.
Will that be just a function of we're moving monies around?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we will be fine. Wages do require that it come to the board though, even though it will be an adjustment, not an amendment, but because it's a wage, it will come before the board to actually make those money moves.
Okay. Staying under general funds, I'm on page 6. 267,808.00.
Prosecuting attorney witness fees.
And so it shows we're about 77% spent for the year. Should we anticipate having to fund more of that?
Most likely, yes,
Okay,
because of the situation going on right now.
so what that would be, the value of going through this is that we can forecast what our need is and start moving stuff around now, rather than in August, we're doing a fire drill.
So our office is in the habit of, we do adjustments all the time. As Rose is entering accounts payable, if something is going to be in the red, we work to do an adjustment. And if we can make an adjustment, we do it. If it has to be an amendment, it obviously has to come before this board, and we typically make it wait another week
Okay.
before we even approve those payables. And so we are doing them we're doing them whenever needed.
So you're doing the adjustments as needed.
Correct.
Amendments come back here.
That's correct. So then we're not doing it as a fire drill at the end of the fiscal year.
Shelley, you look like you wanted to say something about this.
Yeah, so you've given the elected officials their budget, and you don't get to touch that without our permission. The
Understood.
budget adjustments have signatures from us.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm only looking at the general fund. I'm not looking at other department heads, just the things that,
Most of us elected officials are in the general fund.
oh, okay, all
So
right.
I'm trying to say that you don't get to take something from my budget unless I say that that's okay.
Got
And
it.
I don't get to take from somebody else's budget. Unless-
Okay,
And so,
I understand that.
so Rose works closely with those folks when it applies to them. You will recall during budgeting, we were able to put funding into contingency. And so many times when we have to do some sort of adjustment, those funds are coming from contingency to make those lines whole. As we approach the end of the year, we'll start kind of hunting and pecking within those departments to balance things. But we don't want to mess with too many other lines now, because then we might short us later in that line. And so many times if we have to do an adjustment, it comes from contingency in the general fund specifically.
Got it. So I've moved to page 8. Item 959.
Nine, five, all right,
The
what's the
autopsies.
department code? Okay, autopsies.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know what any of those numbers mean, so.
Oh, so 101 is the fund, and then the next number is the department, and then the one after that is the applicable pay.
I'm not gonna try to learn them because I hear
Oh.
they're changing anyway.
I mean, you've been here for years, come on.
Yeah, I don't pay that much attention. So here, we've used about 63% of the funds,
Mhm,
and we're not even really into the busy year yet, busy time of year.
Yeah.
We know that that's something that we're looking at, and we know that we're probably gonna have to fund that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that one's a hard one to predict. I mean, how many people are gonna die this year? So we do our best. We speak with Dr. Gozanowski about that and what her, projection is. Sometimes we hit the mark on that one, sometimes we don't.
Okay.
That one's a really hard one to project because we're not God. So,
Oftentimes expenditures are not linear in government. Like I pay out some things only in July.
Sure.
And so it looks like I've used nothing that you've given me the last 9 months to spend.
Yeah.
I don't need to, but July comes around, I need all of it.
I went through all 89 pages, and I understand some of these things, and that's why I'm not asking questions on every single overage or shortage. And again, the next time I look at these answers, I won't have to have these questions,
Right.
okay? So I appreciate you guys bearing with me.
of course.
But I'm looking at now, I'm on page 8. Maybe I already asked you to look at this. It's 852-718, short and long-term disability.
Okay.
I would think that would be fairly predictable based on employee count. Are we going to be okay there?
Yes, we will be okay in the end. That one is fairly predictable, but then again, it always depends. Those rates are determined by a lot of factors. And so as we get new employees, that adjusts the rate that we're paying for those various benefits.
Okay.
And so when we make a prediction on those benefits, we're looking at the staff we have in place. And so throughout that fiscal year, if we're getting different staff in, those rates are adjusted based on status of, marriage, single, family, age, health, those sorts of things.
Okay.
And so that one is most likely because of changes in staffing.
Got it.
Mhm.
So staying on that same page, probably a similar answer, 874 and 724, both. Wait, let's just stay on 874. Medical insurance retirees spent about 80% of what we had budgeted, which means we're probably gonna miss that by a pretty big mark.
All right, wait a minute. Oh, so that one is an in and out. Retirees pay for their full premium.
Okay.
And so as somebody retires, then obviously the expenditures are higher than what we budgeted because maybe we didn't know they were retiring, but that one is an in and out.
So there, got it. Okay, so just go down a couple more. When it says retirement county share, the county's paying for part of those retirement benefits.
So the county, so the retirement, the county puts in a share towards all the different retirement plans that we have. You guys put in a percentage, you match the employees. And so that is what that is specific to. It does look like we may be close to missing the mark on that one. And a lot of times that's the same thing. It depends on the employee. It depends on the retirement. It depends if they're in the DC versus the DB. There's a lot of factors into that in those payments. And there's corrections that we have to make. So when an employee retires, MERS goes through and does an entire audit of that person's time with MERS. And if there's corrections to be made after that person's gone, we as the county have to pay for that because the employee is gone. And if I'm being frank with you, every retirement that we've had in the last 12 months, we've had to pay for corrections.
All right, and just to put this in perspective, if you look at the total expenditures for that fund, I mean, you're below your budget, so I realize that it'll all balance out. What I'm trying to determine is what's the mindset of how do we deal with this as we're going on through the year, so that in August, September, we're saying, whoops, we need to put more money somewhere
Yeah.
that we hadn't anticipated.
Mm.
So I'm going to hopefully start cruising through some of this because it becomes repetitive. So I'm already up to page 18 and moving on. So let me put your attention to page 21.
Okay.
The account is 655, 723.00.
723, you said? That's overtime?
Yeah. See where we're at 126%
Yeah.
of budget for overtime. How do we dig our way out of that?
So I'm guessing there's a couple of issues going on with this one. Part of it is I'm guessing there may be some coding issues because we're very low on the scheduled overtime piece. And so there may be a coding issue in BSNA that it's pulling from the wrong line for scheduled overtime versus normal overtime.
Mhm.
And I know for a fact that Tom has had to grant a lot of overtime because of some issues of folks calling in consistently. And when he has to mandate somebody, the contract requires double time, which is by default adding in a lot of overtime for employees. And so part of that is a management issue that we're working through with some staff. And then the other part is we'll make note to double check that all of the overtimes are coded properly versus overtime versus scheduled overtime.
And for the benefit of the group, that emergency medical services is only at 39% of their total budget.
Correct,
So there's plenty of room to move around there. But
definitely.
it's a big miss right now.
Yeah.
And on page 33 and on. Evan's hoping that I have no questions left at all.
Leave it at 3:30.
You got till 3:30.
I can drag this out. No
I know you can.
I'm gonna need somebody to get my kid at 4.
We'll get you out of here. but-
Well, Evan can take him golf.
I'll take him on the
You gonna
golf
get
cart
him?
with me.
You got it?
Okay, I'm already to 51 and still moving on. Out of these are separate departments.
Mhm.
Okay, that's it. And at the risk of sounding condescending, this is light years from where we used to be, all right? And this is for the benefit of the public, for the benefit of this group. This information makes it a lot easier in its presentation to be able to forecast where we're at. Hopefully, it's a better tool for you too.
Mhm.
But it also helps me fulfill my responsibilities. Because quite frankly, up until this year, I really felt like I wasn't doing a good job of managing money at all. Because I had such little insight. So thank you. And going forward, folks, there won't be as many things to touch on. Well, put that in the minutes.
Is there any other questions?
No, I think it's a good tool, and
Appreciate
I'm
it.
glad we're gonna do it quarterly.
Definitely.
Oh, the one thing that, Katie, because you look at this a lot more than I guess I will be looking at, right?
You're not reading every 89 pages every month?
I must confess, I am not like Art. I did not go through every single line item. I do kind of glance at it. This is where my ass is going to be. And I don't know if it's going to be good for everybody else, but if you see something that's out of the norm, kind of highlight it for us.
Yeah, definitely. And that's like what I did in the email when I highlighted the issue with what it looked like we had a negative revenue for property taxes.
But like if something's
Very
like
concerning.
way off balance kind of thing coming up, maybe highlight that one, like make it so we can, our eyes go to it instead of
Sure.
having to pick it out ourselves.
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, the big one was that overtime.
Yep.
When you're already at 126%, you're only halfway through the year.
Yeah,
And like in some of them, you can see like their low dollar amounts. It's like, yeah, it's hard to forecast. It's way over, but it's only $20 anyways.
yeah.
But like I said, if you can like some of the bigger ticket items, just highlight it for us. That way when we're going through, it's like, oh, Katie's well aware of it. Maybe
Do you want me to actually highlight it on the document or call it out in my email?
I would actually personally, I like to see it in the document because I
He
do go
doesn't want to
through.
open the document.
Pardon?
Scroll through 89 pages if you highlight, or if you tell us, whatever's easier.
Whatever easiest for you. Howard.
You tell us, we'll go to it.
I know.
Some of us will choose to look at the entire document.
Yeah.
And I agree with Tim, that's from a macro management perspective, that's all you would generally do is say, we got 5 line items on here, here's our explanation for it. And we trust that that's all there is and we move on.
Is this document sent to the elected official and department heads too? I mean, if I'm Tom and I see that my overtime is there, I've got red flags going off.
So I'm sending this 89 page document to you folks. Shelley's office does distribute trial balance information to the departments each month as well. But it's more condensed. It's not this such detail like what you're receiving.
It gives each department head an
Yes.
idea where they're at.
Everyone has it, and everyone has access to BSNA General Ledger. So all the department heads can log in and kind of look at their stuff. They have that ability as well. And that's part of the encouragement of our offices is to make sure they're being good stewards and keeping an eye on their budget. If they can't manage their budget, we have to step in and help them manage it. And, that just creates more work for everybody. So let's manage it effectively the first time.
But if you want to be able to speed through this, the way to do it is first only focus on general funds and just look at the total expenditures, not each line item. Because as long as the total expenditures are within budget, really, I leave the rest of the detail to you. But because this is my first time through, I did want to hit some specifics.
Anybody else have any comments? If not, we will move on to our Headley update. We did get good news this morning. Yeah.
Yes, so we started to talk about Headley briefly a few meetings ago, and I said I'd come back in a couple of months just to kind of give an update of what things are going on right now. Our office met with representatives from Plant Moran. Plant Moran does consulting and, guiding services and those sorts of things. And so we met with a gentleman who has helped other communities in millage resets, overrides, all of those sorts of things. And so we just had conversation with him, like, what are some best practices, that sort of thing. Very, very insightful. He flat out told us this book is useless.
I'm going to disagree with that for one point. That was created, so when the commissioners were posed with questions, we had a reference.
Sure.
So if the question was about certain millages or an understanding of different areas, I don't think the idea was to distribute the book to the community. The idea was more for a knowledge educational basis for commissioners to talk about the Headley
Well, that's
issue.
good to know because I have 40 copies of these and I was told that they were to be distributed throughout the
Yeah.
community.
Well, they were going to go into the municipal offices,
Okay.
the townships and the villages.
So for that purpose, sure. But in essence, this is useless for the community because people aren't going to read this. What they're saying is you want a high level 1 to 2 pager, pictures, graphs, those sorts of things. That's what sells the community. So they provided our office, Rose has them in her email, with some various templates to put something like that together for the community. In going through this book, there are quite a few sections that are very irrelevant and very inaccurate. For instance, this book notes that all of our millage funds are enterprise funds, which is absolutely untrue. They're special millage funds. So there's a lot of inaccuracies in here. So this book's going to need a full redo for your purposes, but then we'll also put together a high level 1 to 2 pager for the community. I'm still waiting from Matt on some information regarding the tax allocation board, whether or not it still needs to be in effect when it goes on the ballot, or can they set their piece and then it goes away, that sort of thing. So we're working on that. We're also trying to think about a creative way of how we're going to do this, because it's a give and take relationship with the community. And so how do we approach that give and take? So Plant Moran saying that, you tell the community that if they want to protect things like animal control, they should put it in the general fund because now it's part of the general fund and it's more protected. But you could spin it the other way that says, well, if it's in the general fund, it's easier to cut. So we're trying to work through that whole, how do we want to approach this for the community? I know that Amy Ferris called me to talk about theirs because they want to reset theirs. And, politely said, well, you can't just, it's a whole team effort in Benzie. And so the community, the townships are reaching out to me as well. So if the county is going to pursue a millage to reset, override, what have you, we have to tell a really good story. And I know the townships are on board. So I'm still waiting on Matt on some more information. Now that we have the templates, we'll kind of put together some templates as to what it might look like. And then we'll be back with more, but I didn't have a lot of update other than that.
Keep in mind that document that was, that has to be at least 4 years ago.
It's 2020.
There you go. Okay. So yeah, we would expect some of it to be outdated. When I was in Lansing on Friday, I was kind of sitting on the outside of a discussion regarding Headley, and that the legislature is posing some bill that would make it easier to get relief from Headley. So it may be worth asking.
Okay.
And I'll try to, if you need a name, you probably have more contacts than I do, but you want to see where that stands?
Yeah.
That'll fit. And you said something about a special millage versus,
An
Enterprise.
enterprise fund.
what's the difference between those two?
Enterprise funds are so EMS we would consider an enterprise fund because of the self-sustaining of it, essentially. So it's bringing in revenue, it's providing that service for the revenue. A special millage fund, which is what most of them are, they're special millages for a purpose.
Mhm.
Whereas EMS, and maybe you can explain this a little better than me, but they're providing that service, they're taking in revenue. It's a different style of accounting based on the services they're providing.
So when you look at Maples,
Mhm.
they have a revenue stream separate from the operating millage. Are they considered an enterprise fund then too?
For component.
Yeah, they're a component unit, so it's
They-
even more
They do
different.
their own accounting. Their audit is
Separate.
separate. Health department separate, road commission separate.
Mhm.
Those are component units of that account.
So they're a little different in that sense because of that reason.
Enterprise funds include the DTRF and EMS.
Okay. That's it. All right, I'm not gonna, maybe everybody else already knew the answer, so I'll
Art, I did not.
It's governmental accounting.
Yeah, it's,
It's kind of convoluted and awkward, because she described it, yet that also describes the CNT millage. That also
yeah, it
describes-
could.
It's
It's very,
and
but the fact that this has misinformation to me is a problem.
the last comment about Headley is every township that I come in contact with is more in supportive of us addressing this issue. In fact, we've gotten to a point now where they're accusing me of kicking the can down the road because we've been talking about it for 7 years. So I hope that, we do chase this and get something done. I know that we said this year, I think we said we were targeting November of 24.
Mhm.
And there was some reason for that. Apparently, it had something to do with some statute.
I don't remember.
there is no countywide, voting.
Oh, isn't there?
Yeah, we'd have
Is
to
that
pay the
just
election.
Frankfurt?
Road commission is supposedly going on.
Oh, yeah,
If the
supposedly.
road commission purchases it, we can jump on with them.
But we'd still have to pay our share.
Pay our
So
share.
unless it's a state or federal scheduled election, the locals have to pay. So if we did anything in 2023, the county's on the hook for a lot of money for the election, and how with election law changes, a lot more money than it used to be. So it makes sense to do it in 2024 or 2026, because then we can hop on a state and federal election ballot and not have to pay a whole bunch of money.
What would it cost us if we were to piggyback the road commission? Because they're gonna pay for a portion of it. too.
Honestly, we don't even know with all the new election law changes, because now you have to staff precincts for 8 or 9 days. And there's all these new added costs, and we haven't rolled it out. And the state is suggesting that the locals roll out those new changes in May, but they don't have to, but then they have to in August. And so we don't really know yet, because we haven't had an election with all the new changes.
My opinion only, but I think it'd be worthwhile knowing what that a dollar would be. Because then we can determine whether it's a good investment or not for this year. Because I know, like many of you, I'm tired of kicking that can down the road too. We know it has to be addressed. I think there isn't even 6 counties anymore that are in an indefinite status with that.
I think we're one of 2 left.
Yeah, there was 6 originally
I
and
think
now there's
so.
a lesser number and
Yeah.
um,
Do you
It's always
recall?
gonna
Problem is
cause-
right now is we have an excess of dollars through the CARES Act, through LATCF.
Through
through
ARPA,
Opioid
through
and
marijuana.
money coming back,
Right.
and
So
our
do-
fund balance is rich.
Right.
How do
I
you-
would have a
Is
hard
enough
time
trust
selling that.
established to reinstate the resetting mechanism without raising taxes? Because we don't need to do that right now. It's the mechanism that needs to be changed. We need to eliminate the indefinite and reset the cap.
And if that's what we're going after, I would feel more comfortable doing that in 2024. So we're not funding an election, because what is the average before all the election changes for the county? Do you know?
I don't know what the individual townships had to pay because they did all their own. They also did all their programming, but the programming is probably about 350 to 400 per township. Ballots were running, I got a cheap price on ballots at 50 cents. But they said they were gonna be going up. So you're looking at, you'd have to buy 17,000 ballots. Just on my cost alone, that's what I can tell you. Couple thousand for advertising for the elections. But
I
what
can-
the cost of the townships are for,
I can tell you for the city of Traverse City, we had 7 in-person precincts, 3 AV precincts just for the city. We would tell the schools to plan $30,000 to hold an election.
okay. Because based on the numbers you're throwing out there, and I realize it's just against the wall kind of stuff. We're at about $18,000 or $19,000, which would be an easier decision. And where I'm looking at Headley, maybe a little differently than some others, is I'm looking at doing away with some of the special millages and capturing in general fund for a couple of reasons.
Mhm.
Perception. I gotta tell you, a lot of people tell me, how come we got so many millages? And
Yeah.
as we compare to other counties, we really have a lot of millages.
We're very millage heavy in Benzie County, and I reached out to Jennifer at MSU to talk about doing another survey. I'd like to do a community survey that's a simple ask of, do you like the à la carte millage system, or would you like a streamlined millage system? Because there are a lot of people who like the à la carte. I want to support this, but gosh, I don't want to support that. So we had great response to the surveys we've done in recent years, and MSU's willing to do it for nothing for me to do another community survey. I think that would help us put our path is that.
And I'm not talking about all of them, but if we could go from 13 to 7,
Yeah,
that'd be a big movement. Also, what happens when we do that is some of these entities that are being supported by special millages, they have pretty substantial surpluses. And it'll allow us then to have discretion as to how we use the money. It could be 1 year the sheriff's office needs it, and the next year, just as an example, EMS needs it. Right now, we just don't have that discretion. And I realize that part of that thinking of the commissioners was, well, we'll just let the community decide.
mhm,
But whether they elect,
Was nobody wanted to tackle head.
yeah,
right,
And so we need to fund this, so we'll have to go for an individual. vote.
yes,
My suggestion to Amy Ferris is if we're not gonna do this for the next couple of years, she may want to
do a
put
special
out a
millage.
special millage for whatever she was trying to fund. But that's what happened is because nobody wanted to tackle this big behemoth, that we'll just keep doing individual millages. Well,
Yes,
pretty soon you got 13 silos of money and Peter's got a lot and Paul's 4, but you can't share
Right.
because they're in different silos.
mhm,
Whereas if you put Peter and Paul in the general fund, Peter can borrow from Paul and Paul can borrow from Peter. And
So Shelley, just out of curiosity, when do you remember, you've been with the county a long time, what is the least amount of millages you've seen on a tax bill?
it was probably 1997 when I got here.
So how many were there?
Don't know, but I can look it up. But it just has increased over time because nobody has ever not supported a millage. And then we've just continued to support them since then. I don't remember of any millage being voted down. Do you?
a jail one time, I'm told, law enforcement.
Really?
That was a new one.
A new one, they said no. But one that existed, I don't think one that's existed has ever been voted down.
Well, and I'm seeing in a lot of communities, because the state puts out a long spreadsheet that says everybody's millages by county. A lot of counties are going to, they have their general fund millage, and then they have a Department of Public Safety millage, and that covers all aspects of public safety. And then the, Commission on Aging and such. And so that's how they've streamlined in some counties is they've done it that way. That's an option. Or you
So TNT.
SRO,
SRO,
jail,
All those could be under one umbrella.
Yep.
As a public safety. millage.
correct. A lot of counties have done public safety millages.
Yeah,
So we
bundle
talked about
four.
doing that.
That would
We
bundle
did-
quite a
We
few.
did talk about that, but then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And all the,
and then suddenly
Change
we had a
things.
big influx of money,
Right.
which, how do you ask when you got a growing surplus? And
Yeah,
I mean, all those things need to be explained, but that's why I'm saying, I'm not just asking for relief from that, but what are we gonna do with that?
yes.
And what it is we're gonna reduce the number of special millages that are on the ballot.
Mhm.
So it may seem appropriate to wait to 24, but I'd just be curious to know what the cost would be, if it would be worth the while, the investment. That my opinion only, others may.
We have 13 and then 3 of them have AV County boards.
We got 16 precincts.
it's,
I had 10 downtown. I paid 30,000. It's a lot of money.
You have to have 3 people.
You should be able to
Yep, you have
vote
to
in
have-
one day.
You have to have 3 people for that 9 days.
There is some discussion though about that early voting on 9 days. that communities, smaller communities might be able to centralize that.
Well,
I've
yeah,
heard-
the clerk would have to take it over, the county clerk.
Well, no,
I
they
think.
could, different townships could get together, but then they'd have to come up with an agreement. And they did talk, even you, if the county had an area, yeah, the clerk could have try to man that.
Let's just take Platte Township as an example. They got like 400 people living out there total, that many. Let's assume that 2/3 of them vote.
Mhm.
So it'd be worth their while to collaborate with another
Township.
precinct.
Yeah, they
Because
can
90
do that.
days is just, well, I won't get into that.
The only thing is you might confuse the voter
Mhm.
because on election day, then they would have to have
Oh,
their townships would
Mhm.
still have to be open for the voting. And you'd have to have the clerks of each of them, if anyone Michigan is the only one that has 9-day early voting, same day registration, and no reason AV. We're the only state that has it. So anyone can even go in and register with the clerk, but the clerk has to be there to do it. They couldn't, if they were a Platte Township individual, they couldn't register with a Lake Township clerk.
okay.
So
So if they only have 3 hours a week scheduled in their office, suddenly they have to be there 8 hours a day for 9 days.
Correct.
8 hours a day for the first, they have to be open 8 to 5, 8 consecutive days, so even through the weekend.
Yes.
And then on that 9th day to this election day, so then it's 7 to 8 PM that night.
And right now
Anybody know what
there's,
they were voting for.
and now they're trying to figure out how they're gonna ensure that people aren't registering in multiple jurisdictions because the systems are supposed to be offline and not talk to each other.
Right.
I know there's a lot of complications and it sounds like it.
More people need to work in a clerk's office and then they would understand what just happened.
Yeah.
Cost $5,000 a precinct.
500, I thought.
Hmm?
How much per precinct?
Well, just from
That's
the
just county
county's end of
costs.
it, not what the township has to pay.
Oh,
The programming is usually about $400.
So if we end up talking 20 grand at this level, plus $5,000 a precinct.
Mhm.
And we have to,
$100,000.
we have to pay the full cost. We have to pay the full cost as the county.
9 days. It has to be fully staffed for 9 days.
Mhm.
So the wages for that for 9 days, we used to have it staffed fully for 1 day.
And if they can get the people,
It
they're having a
worked.
hard time.
Sure did.
Just multiplied by 9, the number of times, I mean,
Only other question I had, you said you've talked all the townships.
No, I've talked to a few.
Because that to me was a little misleading. That was part of the problem before we developed that board. You'd have somebody like Lake had a huge fund balance. Somebody like Benzonia that just wanted. So it was very difficult to get these folks to agree. You had TBA ISD involved in this or whoever it is now. the schools.
North Ed.
Yeah, and to get everybody to agree, a huge problem,
Mhm.
and the time limits with that committee. I was just, when I.
No,
thought I
not
heard you
all,
say-
some. Many have
Okay.
called about it.
And usually that's the ones you hear from first,
Mhm.
and the rest of them don't need it, I mean,
When was the
Wait.
last attempt we did this, 2009?
I don't know. It was far before me. I want to say it was mid 2000s.
really good reading.
I became county treasurer in 2012, and my treasurer said to me, I will retire before that happens again. I'm not putting
Yeah.
myself through that a second time.
I read the minutes of some of those meetings. Now, you could tell it wasn't going anywhere.
Said, I will not do this again. And as county treasurer, I'm required to be on that tax
Correct.
Allocation board, yeah.
allocation board. And she
Yes.
said, I will retire if you invoke the tax allocation board again.
Well, would it behoove us to move forward getting information?
Yes.
I mean, there's a couple steps that I think need to happen. We need to, I like your survey idea to find out if the community would be in support of bundling. But we also don't know what the allocation board will come up with. We know that the maximum the general fund can be set at is 5.29 mils. That's really high based on us operating at 3.3 right now.
We're at 3.3773.
3 something. So if the allocation board comes back and says, we, want to give an effort, we feel that setting it at 4.2 is reasonable and that's what the millage language will be, because we don't have any say in that. That's the, once they decide, we either go with that or we don't.
Correct.
I think what we need to understand is, once they make a determination and they provide us with the information that they determine, how long is that good for? We're waiting on that, right? Because that tells us how long, what the window is to have an election and to make a decision. So, I mean, as soon as Matt can provide us with the duration of the allocation board's decision,
Mhm.
I think the next best move is to put them together so we can find out what they come up with. And if it's even reasonable to move forward. If they come back and say 5.29, that's where we think it should be. It would be hard to believe that that would be a go with the voters.
Well, again, but the allocation board would have to understand that it's our intent to do away with some of these special millages. Because they may say, based on your current need, you need 4.4 mils. Yeah, but we're gonna replace 4 other millages. Oh, well, yeah, now you need 5.2.
So do we have to have that information first? What is the order of events? How does this have to happen? What answers do we need to have when the allocation board sits down to do their work?
I have no experience. I don't know.
And how do we get those answers?
Well, I'm
You have to adhere to what you're gonna do.
right.
You don't wanna do what the school does.
I know.
If you make that mistake, you will never get anything passed.
So I'm waiting on Matt for a few of those kind of things, the timing and all those sorts of things. And I just followed up again while I was sitting here. So I'm waiting on that. A survey we can put out pretty quickly to get some of that information. And then, I mean, we could spell out scenarios of bundling and those sorts of things. I mean, we can put that on paper, I think, fairly easy. As far as that information, I guess what we need to hear from you is, what is your vision? Is it to bundle? Is it to not bundle, but to just have a mechanism in place? I mean, that's gonna kind of paint the way of where we go. You know, is the intent to bundle? If that's what it is, then that's what we will feed off from. If the intent is to leave it how it is, but have a mechanism in place to increase it when needed, well, then that's a different story.
I would invite the sheriff. Well, how do you feel about bundling?
Put you right on the spot, huh, Sheriff? I do.
Or do you not want to discuss it now? Would you need more information to see what it looked like? Or do you have an opinion just from this conversation right now? I mean, because it would be a public safety bundle, right? That's
It
what would
wouldn't
make the
have
most
to be.
sense.
It could be whatever you guys think. You
So
could
you-
do a
you
public
couldn't-
safety bundle if that's what you wanted to do, and you say all public, but you'd have to be specific, because EMS could be public safety, central dispatch is public
That's-
safety,
That's
animal
what I was
control
gonna
is
say.
public
Okay.
safety. So is
Once you
it
bundle,
public safety? Is it law enforcement? Is it, you know, you have to be
Right.
very
once you
specific.
bundle all the entities,
All public safety.
now we're all
Are there any that make sense to you to be bundled?
within my office for sure.
Law enforcement specifically, I think would be
So
what you.
TNT,
Oh.
TNT, SRO,
Road patrol,
Road
jail.
patrol.
yeah. Well, that's horrible.
Jail should be general fund.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
It should
mandated
be.
service.
The mandated service, and it is supposed to be under the umbrella of the general fund. We are
And
one of the few in the state of Michigan that doesn't have it under that.
That was the thought when we years ago tried to do the law enforcement road patrol millage to switch those, but it got voted down. So then it just stayed status quo. You know, we just had to keep trucking on.
Maybe that's a place to start, by the way, is just which ones are mandated of the 13 special millages. Maybe that's a place to start.
Jail.
Jail's
Yeah,
the
jail.
only
Is that
one.
the only one?
Yeah, none of the rest are
And we got off
mandated.
track because we put a debt millage with an operating millage together. That should have never happened.
Okay.
That's the cause of all the problems since time began,
That's for the jail.
which was like 1992.
Yeah.
So because of that, their operating millage is outside of the general fund. If there's any bundling, jail goes to general fund.
Well, but you gotta be specific though on jail, because the whole jail isn't a mandated service. Portions of the jail are.
Then you get to fund it to the level
Correct.
that
So.
we.
Mhm. You could say this much is for the mandated piece of the jail and
Only
the
a
rest
holding
is
cell is mandated,
in transport. Yeah.
transport.
Yeah,
That's all
that's-
that's mandated.
So if you want to, I mean, if you're really like getting down to the nuts and bolts of
100
it.
years ago, you could get away with that.
Yeah. and
Yeah,
we-
I
we
mean,
can
counties
have a-
are, that's why we have Grand Traverse inmates. Kalkaska closed up shop. But if you want to get specific to it, if you're gonna put something in the general fund, you put the mandated services in the general fund.
Just a thought in terms of homework. Maybe, or if not the next meeting, the one following, each one of us looks at the special millages and looks at which ones do we want to retire or bundle. And I'd be curious to see then, as we bring them forward, which ones overlap. It's a starting point. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a starting point.
Yeah.
Well, didn't Katie indicate about using MSU extension about doing a survey?
Yeah, so my thought was to hear from the community on what does the community like? If the mass majority of the community says, no, we like à la carte, while trying to bundle might be a lost cause.
That's what I'm getting at. I would like to see maybe a survey and those results, because I know what I personally would like, but I'm not sure all my people in my jurisdiction
Like
or
it.
my district feel the same way.
Yeah, no, I understand.
The surveys can be put together pretty quickly, and then it's just a matter of publishing it and then getting the word out for folks to take it.
Because I guarantee there's a lot of people out there that really like that we have drug enforcement, that we have school resource officers. You know, they like being able to contribute to the
Specific
animal
things.
shelter, right? I mean, people are passionate about those things. Now, do they really care about the jail? Maybe not,
Right.
right? I mean,
Sorry, Dan.
We're always a
He gets that a lot.
In contrast to that, so the number of people that I talk to, they don't pick out any specific millage. They just say, how come we got so many millages?
Right.
And so their thought is, it irritates them when they look at their tax bill and there's, 14 different line items on there. And it's just perception.
Yeah.
It's an
oh,
attitude.
sure, but like I said, I don't know what the average person wants. Is
I would
kind of-
argue that the average person doesn't even look at their tax bill. I mean,
But they know when they go,
I mean, if they have a
their
mortgage, a lot of them
mortgage
aren't.
And it's paid, and I would argue that the average, I'd say up to 90-some%, I don't even look at it.
You could be right, but I can tell you the first year that we introduced the sinking fund, after it was approved for the school,
Mhm.
I was getting phone calls. Hey, what's this on my tax bill? I said, you voted for it.
Well, I mean, that's what
So
I'm getting
I
at.
got
is
somebody looking at their tax bill.
They're not looking at the tax bill, but when they go to the polls and they go to vote, they see these millages. It's like, oh yeah, I really want to vote for that. Yeah, I don't like our sheriff, so let's nix all
Right.
those.
There's a
law
lot of
enforcement.
millages that aren't in this circle either.
Right.
Villages, townships.
Right.
Yeah.
We all have
There's
Right.
so
a lot of
many.
them.
Yeah.
We're talking about a few, but there's, schools, TBA,
Yeah.
who knows?
Conservation
Who
district.
Who knows what? Yeah.
Yeah, we're only talking about the ones at the 13 are at the county level.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do we think about the task to see what bundling would look like for each of us? I'd be interested to have the sheriff participate too, because your support in this, if bundling were to occur, is going to be important. So it's going to matter what you think the best direction is.
Because they're the ones likely to bundle.
Right.
I mean, when you look at
So-
the array of them.
Well, hey, you're the one that gets the big bucks. What do you want us to do?
I like homework. Let's do it.
So should I work on the survey? You guys work on your,
I think the survey of the voting public is very, very important
I
for
agree.
guiding us. So I would
So
say
do
that's a
this-
number one.
so I'll work on the survey. You guys work on your homework. And then we come back together. And hopefully I'll have heard from Matt by then on some
You'll
things.
send us an email of all the villages. I gotta drag my tax.
Well, we have our county at a glance thing, the sheets.
Yeah,
Oh,
if you
Gary, I'm
look,
glad you asked that.
or if you look at the budget, at the end of the budget is the L 4029 as well. That has all of them.
I think they're listed a couple times in the audit. too.
Yeah, they're all over the
They're all over.
place.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Look at the audit, because they combine things
Oh, did
they
they?
do, yeah.
for numbers.
Okay.
So
They
they're
bundle
all for you.
already?
They're already bundled for you.
Mhm.
So
Okay,
just
so
so I understand,
homework.
yeah, what is the homework?
Go ahead, summarize.
Well, you proposed it, so I'm gonna let you nutshell it.
So I'll say, you know, it's actually a fairly short, a month from now. Let's come back and each of us look at the special millages and make a note of which ones we think we can bundle. That decision, I think, should be accompanied by conversations we're having with our constituents. That's why we get a month to do it.
So May 9th,
If that's the date.
that would be our month meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
And we also, you know, financially, we're in good shape now. Better than we have been. We see what that, try to figure out that increase as far as a percentage, because if we bundle this stuff and go to 5.29. But my biggest concern is perception with the public.
Well, if we,
Look at
If
all
we
the money we guys
bundle-
got now. You said a 45% fund balance.
no, I didn't. But if we bundled, I don't think the intent was to completely increase. If we bundle, we're condensing what's on the tax bill. It wouldn't necessarily be a crazy increase. It
Right.
may be an increase, but it would at least
Well,
would
I prefer not to
streamline
have
the
an
L
increase,
4029
but yeah.
and the tax bill. I mean, we can give you projected numbers all day long based on this year's taxable value and that sort of thing. And we can definitely do that.
You know, we talk about an abundance of money, but folks, this is this is a 2-year snapshot.
Yeah.
And then we're right back to where we were. So it's not like we're flush with cash from here until infinity. That's very short, and we've worked hard to make sure that how we're using those monies are one-time events, but those are all going away. And if you want to plan for the future,
Yeah.
but you only have enough money to manage today, it doesn't work. I could make a pretty big case about saying, yes, we understand that we're collecting more than we need in order to operate today, but we need to be able to put money aside so that we can do some future planning. We got growth in the community.
Mhm.
The citizens have a different expectation of what government services are all about.
Yes.
We're using technology better now. We've got to continue to get better at how we communicate. No, we need money to grow into the future.
Yeah, and I would totally support that, looking at it from maybe, I'm just grabbing a year right now, but a 5-year perspective or something. Because if we don't, I mean, if you put it in that view for the people who are being taxed, all of us, that they have an understanding. And you're not going to lose your services, this is what we need to sustain. And I think to give them that longer term perspective will make it understandable and will communicate. That has to be part of it too.
And I think that's where the mechanism piece comes in, is that we're not really looking to necessarily up all of your taxes, but we need the
Right.
mechanism in place so that we can grow when appropriate.
And sustain exactly what they expect and have gotten used to having.
And equally important, we have the discretion to move monies around, which we don't today.
Yeah, I like.
Okay. I think we have marching orders.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to our discussion regarding mileage restrictions for Board of Commissioner members.
So this was briefly touched on this morning. We need to get to a spot where we're all comfortable regarding attending digitally versus attending in person to some of these meetings. We've ramped up the participation of this board into groups that are not just local, so that our rural voice is heard. And so we need to be conscious of that, though, because we can't have all 7 of you driving to Lansing every month. That's crazy expensive. And so I guess this was to just have a conversation to get to a point of, this is the comfort level of the board of, attend digitally except every other month, or attend digitally unless you feel you absolutely need to be there, or, that sort of conversation.
I can tell you, if you're not in the room, you're not part of the discussion. No matter how effective we think Zoom is. I had a great example just last week. I'd been on that legislative committee for nearly 2 years. I came on during COVID, so everybody was Zooming. Last week was the first time I was actually able to sit down at the meeting. what a difference in level of participation. What a difference in how much information I could take away from that. So it may not be every month, but I don't think we should discourage people from being on site from time to time.
Maybe we have a limitation on distance, like if it's relatively within Michigan or within, Lansing would be maybe the furthest, but if we have a call up, let's say up, down in Monroe, Michigan, well, maybe we don't go to that one. That's kind of far away. Or we,
I think we have to look at the value of being in person attending on that. And that's probably going to be a call on all of us, individually, knowing which ones. Like, for example, the Northern Michigan one, I would totally agree that you would have to be there in person on that. That made a big difference. I went to Environment Regulatory, the first one in person, because it was the first one. But after that, I went, okay, the read of the room was there were about this many of us, on the Zoom screen and only 2 people in the room. And the next time around, it was the same way. So I learned from only a couple meetings that probably wasn't the best judgment to go in person to that all the time unless there's something specific. But Northern Michigan, and I'll go for that one next when it's available, that position. But that committee, I do think that's one that in person, and then you as commissioners know by the ones you're attending, the ones that there's value in you being in that seat, that room. So I would say that's up to.
And I don't think the
Your
idea
judgment
is
on
to
that.
say no. The idea
Correct.
isn't to say don't go. The idea is that we have to have an understanding that if all 7 of you are driving to Lansing every single month, that's $250 per person that I have to pay you on top of your $40 per diem. $250 a round trip from here to Lansing. Times that by 7, we can't withstand that.
No, and that's the judgment, I think.
I think the intention was good to have us represented. Rural communities need to be represented because what MAC supports is heavily dependent on what the Southwest Michigan
Correct.
wants to do.
Yep.
So that's why we're placed where we are. But there are meetings more than not where you have a presentation about, so transportation I was on, we have a presentation about electric cars. There's a legislative update. And that's the meat of the meeting. Now, that didn't serve the county for me to drive to Lansing, and I have an agenda to see that that's what the topics are going to be. I think with an agenda in front, now, if there's going to be a vote or if there's going to be something that really impacts us where we need to be heard, I think administration, the chair, I think we should have to clear that for the trip. I just, I don't know.
I don't have any problem having, I'll call them guide rails. I don't have any problem. If it's out of the, go to call you or Bob and say, this is what I'm thinking. If I can't make a case for it, well, so be it.
Well, and the other thing that you brought up was what committee was it that pays for your trip?
Community Action Agency.
Okay, they pay for that. And I'm more than willing to approach Central Wellness. I mean, I wanted to participate in Health and Human Services because it was a nice fit with the Health Department and Central Wellness, both of which I serve on. So I don't think it would be out of line to say, my vote impacts not only the county, but this organization too. Do you want me to be in person? And if so, do you want to pay for me to go? I could see them, they have a much bigger budget than the county does. So I don't know. The last one, both Chip Johnston and Richard Schmidt attended the Health and Human Service. So it wasn't necessary for me to be there. They were both there. So I don't know. Thoughts?
I'm with you. Look at the agenda, and I think everybody here can make the determination, but I do also like maybe running it by the chair, vice chair.
I'm even at a point, Rhonda, where if I turned in my expense report and it was decided, look at Art, these really 2 don't qualify, I'm not gonna call up and make a big deal out of it. It's, okay, they didn't qualify, next time I'll know. Of course, it could be the next time they do qualify based on whatever's happening.
But see, I don't know that in my office when we're paying you. So it has to be determined later. I don't know what was on your agenda to qualify you to go.
So the chair and vice chair don't see our expense reports before they get paid.
No.
Well, the vice chair only by default because she's,
Oh, I don't see those. I see mileage.
They don't
Yeah, it's
say-
on the
they don't
same
show up
page.
on the 18th.
Right.
yeah,
I guess I made an assumption.
your mileage is on the same page as your meeting per diem. So,
Mileage part,
yeah, the mileage part. But we don't know what was on your agenda to qualify you to go. Because you're saying qualify. Well, we don't know. We wouldn't know what to qualify you. And I'm not saying don't go. I mean, if there's a Zoom option and you're all professionals here. You all can make professional decisions. If you see the agenda and you're like, meh, I don't really need to be there, I would encourage you to do it via Zoom.
I can tell you that, it's, as the rest of you, it's a 7-hour trip, round trip.
Yeah.
And just to go to Lansing, and you got to leave at your house at 6 in. So it's not like for an extra, it wasn't 250, but for an extra $150, honestly, I don't need it that bad.
Right.
I'll wait till 10 o'clock and go on Zoom. So
So-
it's not like I'm begging to go down to Lansing.
Yeah. I'm just asking you all to use your professional mindset, your professional thoughts in making those decisions. And if you have to be there, you have to be there. And that's why we put you on these committees, is because we need our voice heard. But, if they're talking about things that aren't relevant to Benzie County, well, maybe that's a meeting you attend via Zoom. And I want to be able to entrust into all of you as professionals to think about that financial burden onto the county and the county taxpayers when deciding whether or not you're going to attend in person or digitally.
Good enough?
Good enough.
All right, let's move on.
I'm not sure where that landed.
I think that
Use your
landed-
professional-
We're professionals.
Use your
we're
professional
accountable.
judgment,
Yeah.
We're gonna let you use your own judgment, Art.
except you are.
That is dangerous.
That also applies for department heads.
Yes.
Going to conferences and other meetings of our responsibility. You're talking about this, like, this is inclusive to this group. This is a countywide policy that also encompasses department heads and elected officials.
Yeah, and your county policy does say it encourages you to use the most economical way.
Okay, very good. Good discussion. So let's move on to our opioid funding discussion. We have Ken Hilliard here, drug court, and Michelle Custer, after Michelle Custer. Want to go first? Okay.
And who's going first?
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Hilliard. I'm the 19th Circuit Court Drug Court Coordinator for Benzie County here. I've had this position here for the last, I'm going on 3 years now. I'm here today to ask for some of your opioid money that you have accumulated here over the last year or so. I will let you know a little bit about the program. It started in 2019-2020 grant. The state funded us $36,000. Unfortunately, that was the year COVID hit and everything was shut down. So the program never got off the ground until probably June of 2020. So that pretty much nothing was spent that year. Police Ware was the coordinator at that time. I started in 2021, October. And when Felice submitted the grant for that year, they cut it to $28,000 from 36 to 28,000. So after that year was up, I resubmitted a new grant for 21-22. And I tried to get it back up to the $36,000 budget, and they cut me back down to $28,000 again. So past year, okay, they're not gonna give me no more, so I tried to stay the same at $28,000. And they cut me another $3,000, so now we're operating off of $25,000. When this grant started out back in 2019, 2020, we had the capability of putting 6 participants into our program. When they dropped it down to 28,000, we had to knock the participants down to 5. And then again for 21, 22, we had to keep it at 5. And when they dropped it down to 22, 23, I had to drop the participants down to 4. What I'm asking for is try to bring these numbers back up to at least 6 participants in our program. The breakdown is, obviously, the coordinator gets the share of the grant. He's operating the show. That's where most of the grant money goes. Other large portion of this grant money goes to supplies. Every time they have to test through the sheriff's department there, that averages out to about $5,000 a year for urine cups just for the 4 individuals we have. So if we're going to be adding on, we have to add on money to that also. Supplies are very limited. A lot of the people are very small budget, paper, computers and stuff. I have a computer that's 4 years old. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to last. Printer, I use my own personal printer at home. But then you have paper, you have ink and stuff like that that the grant pays for. So then you have incentives, gas cards and stuff like that for when the individuals are doing well. We give them incentives to get gas for the car, go to the store and get food and stuff for them. That's also in the grant program. So it's a 2-year program. It starts out in 5 phases. The first phase is 4 months. And the second, third, and fourth phase are all 5 months. Most expensive phase is obviously the first phase, because that's when these individuals are they're all addicts. They've all got caught. And they're all facing felonies. And this is an alternative for them who, in lieu of jail, in lieu of prison, and also lieu to knock their record down from a felony possibly to a misdemeanor if they complete this program. So we have to stretch this out for the whole 2 years, okay? And the first, like I said, the first phase is the most. It's a comprehensive program where you have judge, you have the prosecutor, you have the defense attorney, you have the sheriff's department. We work hand in hand with them. They do all the drug testing. We have myself, we have the probation officer, we have 3 counselors, and we have a life coach. All of us are a team that we meet twice a month. And then we have a scheduled hearing date that same day we have the meeting to discuss the progress of these individuals. It's not done one-on-one, or, it's not done, we're just going to throw this individual in jail and hopefully you'll see the light down the road and he'll be better. It doesn't work that way. It's a 2-year program, and it's designed because it takes 2 years for these individuals to actually see, hey, I don't need this drug. I don't need the addiction to get off, to get off the drug and be a member of society again and be a good father, a good mother, or something like that. We've had 3 people complete this program. We've also had probably about 4 that have not completed the program. Every time when the first phase starts again, like I say, they test 2 to 3 times a week. That means they'll call up in the morning, they'll call our place over, Redwood it's called. It's a place over in California that schedules the appointments for these individuals. It's random. They'll call up and they say, you got to test tonight. And at 5:30, 7:30 in the night, they come down here and they do a urine test at the jail. Also, within that first 90 day, or first month phase, they have to do 90 counseling sessions in 90 days. So that's 1 a day, right? They either have to see a counselor, either have to go to NAAA classes, or they have to go to Liferin, which is similar to an NAAA class, but it's online. So every day, these individuals are going to that. So that's all just the first phase. And as the phases go on, these testing gets less and less and less. Now, if the first phase is probably the hardest, but it's also the hardest on the individual, but it's also hard because these guys, they're addicts. They're trying to get off addict, and they get tested quite frequently. And if you're an addict, you have to be right 100% of the times if you're trying to fake this thing out. If you don't, then there's complications or there's consequences, excuse me, to what you have to do. The team meets, this person did a urine test, it was positive. What's the consequences? Sometimes it's just as little as doing a book report or an essay or something like that, but sometimes it's testing every day for almost a whole month. And there you go, your supplies again. So this budget that I'm working on right now, I don't have that big of an opportunity to have unlimited supplies, you know, for the urine tests and stuff like that. So if the judge orders this individual to test for a whole month, we're trying to figure out where we're going to come up with the money to purchase these other supplies. Usually as the phases go on, they get more comfortable with it, they get more with it, and they get to feel, you can see a difference in them. You can see where, hey, I don't need this drug all the time. They still need this group to get them through. If they have something come up, we had one where she lost a baby. And that's pretty dramatic. And she had to call us, and she talked to our counselors, and she talked to our life coaches for quite a while to get through that so she wasn't back on the drugs. So what we're kind of looking for here is, somewhere between 50 and 20,000. Pick up the differences where we're running a little short right now, and most of that would be supplies. Obviously, the coordinator there would have more hours in if we put a couple more people on board. So it would cover the counselors a couple extra hours a week or something like that. So that's what we're kind of looking for.
So if you're moving from serving 4 to 6 people,
Yes.
how many are you turning away?
Well, we don't. Okay, the program works like this. We don't turn anybody away per se. Okay, with the grant program, the grant tells us who we can put into this program. There has to be a person on felony charges of drugs possession, but it can't be a dealer. Felony charge of possession, of drugs, but they can't have a violent criminal record. So if they have an assault on them, spouse abuse, sexual type assaults, armed robbery, stuff like that, they can't get into the program. We had one the other day where the prosecutors thought this would be a good person to put into the program. We looked into his history, and way back when he was 17, he had a sexual assault. And he's 30-some years old now, and he's been, other than the drugs that he was arrested for, he's been clean. So we can't put him in that program because of that sexual assault that he had back when he was 17. Some of this money probably could go put him through that program because even the prosecutor thought that he would be a good candidate for this program. He has changed that much from when he was 17 until, he was 30-some years old. So turning people away, we don't, but those are the stipulations that the state we have to work with. I think, my own personal opinion, I think the opinion of most of the people on this board is that everybody deserves a chance. And it's up to them whether or not they want to succeed. We gave one individual, 3 different chances. So, and unfortunately, he didn't succeed. But we'd put him on there. He would test positive. Okay, so we would go around the route and get him reorganized, get him back on track again, and then put him through the program again. And he messed out 3 times. So the 3rd time we finally had to let him go. So we're here to help these individuals, not to criminalize them. So,
And can I go back to that question?
yes,
'Cause I'm not sure I understood the answer. So you said in part of your presentation, you said if we had more money, we could take more people.
yes.
And then you said we're currently at 4.
No, we're currently at 2. We have the capability of 4.
And what defines your capability?
The statute I was just talking to you about.
Okay.
Oh, well, the biggest thing is the grant money. Okay.
Okay.
Right now, with the supplies we have, we're right at the edge, like $5,000 per year it's going to cost us for urine supplies. Okay. So when you're testing 2 to 3 times a week, and if they test positive and the judge orders, hey, you're going to be testing for the next 14 days straight, that cuts into our supply. So that's, that is probably the biggest cost we have right now is the supplies.
Yeah, I get that, but let me go back to the question.
Sure.
So currently you have two,
Yes,
said that you have room for four,
correct,
but you don't have anybody you've turned away.
correct.
So that means you only have two that really need to be on that service right now.
No, I see what you're saying. If, but they have to qualify for the program, which I just like, okay, so if they don't qualify for the program, I can't put them in the program.
Got it?
Okay, so if they're arrested for possession of a drug charge, and it's a felony, and we get to circuit court, and I go to interview them, and the prosecutor says, hey, I think this is a good person for the program, we do a history check on them. Okay? So if they don't have any violence on their record, we can put them into the program. That's our biggest problem right there, is finding someone that doesn't have some type of a record in the past that's violent. Okay, now what I tried to explain earlier here is that the prosecutor had one that she thought was going to be really good for the program, but when we checked the history, he had the sexual assault. Okay, so that told us that we couldn't put him into the program.
So currently you have two people that qualify.
That's correct.
And did I hear you say that you've got 4 counselors,
We have 3 counselors and a life coach on board right now.
but you've got 2 people that are going through the program?
That's correct.
So you got more staff than you have people in the program.
Well, we always will. Yeah, our team consists of the judge. It consists of the prosecutor. It consists of the defense attorney. It consists of the probation officer, 3 counselors, and a life coach in the jail here. That's the board members are our staff, if you want to call it that. And probably the life coach and the counselor, the counselor can only meet with these people once a week. Now, when they first start, they have to go 90 and 90 days. Okay, they have to go to a meeting. Yes,
Can I clear up this question?
sure. I'm not sure if I understand what his question was.
There's 2 right now. It's a huge process to get them in because they don't commit a crime in Benzie. They commit a crime in Benzie, Leelanau, Manistee, everywhere else. So to find someone that's available for your program, they may be in rehab, they may be in jail and have holds on 2 other jails. It takes time to get them cleared in all those other jails, out of rehab if that's where they're at, get them back into the program where they need to be. And it goes up and down. A few months ago, we had 4 in the program.
Like a
It's just
roller
when
coaster.
it just depends on where it goes up and down in all the members, except for, I think, the person in charge of it, volunteer.
Yeah.
All the legal is volunteer, all the counselors are
The
volunteer.
only
Paid by the
person,
organizations.
the only person that's getting paid is me.
Oh,
Okay, the counselors, everything else, yeah, I'm the only one getting paid. I'm sorry, all these other ones are volunteering their time. Okay, the counselor, these people, the life coaches, they're volunteering their time. And obviously the judge and prosecutor, they're getting paid, by you guys or the county,
And other than the grant money, what other source of funding do you have?
none.
So that 26,000, that covers your salary
25,
and supplies,
25, yes.
you're full-time?
No, 18 hours a week.
Okay.
I'm contracted, so I work as much as I need to work. So sometimes it's 18, sometimes it's more, but it's in the books as 18. So we'd like to build this program up. I think it's a real good program, helpful program.
Well, I like the fact,
Yeah.
I was pleased and thought that was quite progressive thinking of us as a community,
Yes.
that the judge put this together.
Yes.
It's not that I'm against the program, I just having a hard time following your math.
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, there's a lot of things to this program. I mean, a lot of different directions. I mean, when you're dealing with addicts, it's one day they're doing great, the next day they're down in the basement. And then the next day they're doing great again. The next day you're starting all over again from scratch because you goofed up. And at one point we had a waiting list of 2 people, I think it was at one point here, was it last year or last fall or a year ago? we had a waiting list of a couple people that wanted to get into the program, and we just didn't have the room for them at that time. But, you know, these people, these two that are here now, I mean, they're doing great. But tomorrow, one of them can move up and test positive, and he might be out of the program, or she might be out of the program, or whoever. So it's in and out all the time. And the prosecutor just told me this morning that she had another individual that's she thinks would be good for the program. So after their trial is over here, we're going to get together, and then I'll have to go interview this person. So
I'm familiar with the program in another area, so
okay.
I understand the value of it, but see, I didn't, you were talking about these, what I thought were staff people.
Oh, no, I'm
Realize they're
sorry.
Volunteers.
I know.
What are these folks doing?
Yeah, they're all good. Well, two of them are Catholic Human Services.
Okay.
One's out of was it Pine Ridge up in
Pine Rest.
Pine Rest up in Traverse City. And then we have a life coach. She also works out of Catholic Human Services. So, and, you know, down the road here, we may have to, you know, at one point before we had a life coach, we had a few extra bucks. I was kind of looking for a life coach to put on staff so we could have one that, you know, we could give a few bucks to, and down the road here, we might have to do that too. So,
And you're looking for more than a one-time commitment. You're asking.
Yes.
To be sustainable.
yes, I would.
And the other thing you're asking, I believe, is this young man who didn't qualify because of the requirements for the opioid,
Yes.
for the other side of it. The opioid funds could get a 30-year-old-ish person into a program that will be able to help him.
Yes. Well, what we discussed earlier before the meeting here was that this individual that didn't qualify because he had a sex charge on him when he was 17, and the prosecutor thought he was a good candidate for the program. Since the grant money, I couldn't put him into the program. With this money, I could put him into the program. Okay, if the prosecutor and the team thinks that, okay, he's okay for the program, or we should at least give him a try, we can do that.
Depends on the source of funding.
Exactly, yeah,
Correct.
so the grant, I was not able to do that.
Gotcha.
So we met as staff and brainstormed the various ways, and this was one of the number one things that the staff around the table thought money, opioid settlement funding should go towards. As you recall, the prosecutor was there, the sheriff's office, a few folks from that office were there. Emergency management, I believe, was there, EMS. There's various departments there, and this was one of the things we thought would be a great use of opioid dollars. And so Ken came today to just kind of answer some questions and really talk about the program and what it means for Benzie County. And so I thank him for being here. We have that funding in place right now. We have about $100,000 and there's more funding coming. So based on any conversation today, if the board feels strongly about this program, we could have on the May 9th meeting action to allocate some funding towards the program.
Any more questions?
I got a couple quick ones.
I have a
Go ahead.
question. With the courts, and we do a lot of, I guess, sharing of responsibilities with Manistee County and their courts.
Mhm.
Does this program do that too, or?
No, this is all Benzie County.
Okay, I mean, is there an opportunity to do that, or does that? not-
There's always that opportunity. Both county boards would have to agree to it. So I believe so.
They would
Yeah,
have
I'm
to
just
allocate their own
curious.
funding.
I mean, that would be a great idea. I would like to see that. But right now, we're just looking at Benzie County.
We're progressive in a way.
There's individuals down there that need
Wasn't
this
the judge
assistance.
that
too.
one that did that? I don't ever recall this board agreeing to this.
I think it was all the circuit judge, because
what I-
they're the ones who appoint the person and sign the contract and those sorts of things.
If I understood you correctly, you had 3 complete the course
Yes.
in 3 years,
Yes,
4 that didn't.
correct.
So your success rate's pretty bad, to say the least.
Yeah.
Gary, I'd argue that.
You'd have to,
I would too.
Well, I also want to know if these people are on probation, are they residents in the jail when they get into this?
they're actually
And
both.
what happens when they step over the line?
Okay, well, first of all, when you're dealing with addicts, it's an up and down situation, okay? One day they're doing good, and the next day they're not. And If they cross the line, so to speak, our team meets and decides what's the consequences. Normally, the probation officer will issue a warrant for his arrest or her arrest, whoever it is, and they're back in jail until we decide what the consequences are of that. And then we decide if we're going to give them a second chance or if they're going to go back into the system and possibly go to prison. But all these individuals have gone through the court system, and this is in lieu of usually prison at to complete this course. So if they do not complete this course, it's a violation of their probation parole, and then the judge will sentence them to their ultimate sentence, which is under prison.
Because you said 3 completed, so.
Yes.
It's a recidivism or whatever, the repeat,
Mhm.
have they been back?
No, they have not been back.
Yeah, I know 3 years is very short time
Right.
to,
Exactly.
especially when it
Well,
comes to
well,
an addict. I know what
technically-
you're dealing with, but,
It's not, it's shorter than 2 years because each person, it's a 2-year program. The 2 graduated a year ago, and then the 1 just graduated here about 6 months ago. So yeah, and then, like I said, the other 4, they just couldn't be able to, it's not their time to put yet.
No, here's your thoughts.
I'm all about if we're gonna put money into something, I want to see some progress and
Mhm.
at least hear it. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Well, and then also I would look at, again,
Last,
is long-term, if you have someone in the instance that you gave us that is 30-something, if they're 30 years in jail or prison, how much is that if you're looking at economics?
but also what kind of damage could they do to society? Because drug addicts have a tendency to steal stuff even from family. So I'm also looking at that. What is the cost to society if it doesn't? Granted, if it works, wonderful, but there's always a second side to the stories.
Well, this is an alternative for, like I said, either going to prison. Also, there's some individuals that decide not to. I've interviewed a number of individuals for this program, and they decided that it was too strict of a program, that they would rather go to either the jail or yeah, seriously,
Oh,
yeah. It was, they'd be out in the year a lot, yeah.
and I was.
Yeah, they'd figure out they'd be out in the year less and wouldn't have to put up with it, the program for 2 years. So,
I know when I looked at the opioid dollars, I had 3 criteria for myself: education, public safety, and rehabilitation. If I see these requests coming, it's kind of what right away I'm thinking, does it fit this box? Evan, I'd be curious from a law enforcement perspective, how effective do you think these drug courts are?
I'm a bit jaded, because I've been doing it 30 years and seen that dopers are dopers, but they do work on occasion, and it's a diversion program that I think every county in the state probably has a drug court. So they have some, we have a need for them, and they do work in some occasions, but I'd say for the most part, an addict is going to be an addict. But if,
well, I was a police officer for 25 years, so,
Yeah.
but I also have a son that's an addict. So, and I've seen the programs that he's been through. The 30-day programs don't work. This is the closest thing I've seen since I've been going through this mess, since I've been around. 2-year program, very strict counseling. They got counseling, they got very strict oversight with the judge, the prosecutor, defense attorney, and the jail. They don't, they goose up, they're back in jail. So it's very, very, very strict program. And I talked to a counselor at one time, he says, to make an addict better, you could put them on an island for 2 years, okay? Well, this is the closest thing I've seen so far to an island, okay? It's a 2-year program.
Well, real recovery, unfortunately, I've had some personal experience in families and
Yep.
real recovery requires these people to learn how to resist.
Yes.
So if I'm on an island and I don't have any opportunity, quite frankly, I'm not sure how much progress I've made because I haven't been challenged.
Right, exactly.
But it's kind of like a 50-50. I had one relative, unfortunately, that went through the program and ended up ODing,
Mhm.
and resulted in death. And I have another relative that's in the program, and they're doing well, but theirs was alcohol related. So there may be a difference.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So I'm a little more sensitive and supportive of these things because this individual, because they got to call every morning and find out, is today the day I'm being tested?
Oh, exactly.
You know, it keeps them on a straight and narrow.
Exactly.
But there's a difference between being addicted to meth and being an alcoholic.
Yes, a big difference. You know, and also, some of them said, okay, do I have to test today? And then if they test positive, what's going to be the consequences if I test positive? Okay, you can go all the way from writing, like I say, an essay to going back to prison. There's a big gap in there, and they're worried about that too. So that kind of keeps them on the straight and narrow also.
Always kind of a red flag when they say, do I have to test today?
Yeah, yeah. You know,
All right, well, I think if I wrote it down correctly, the ask is for 15 to 20,000.
yeah, that's what the judge,
Okay,
mentioned to me.
sounds like you have
That
support
would
all
be
the way
yearly.
around. What?
Annually?
That's assuming
Our
he gets the
opioid
grant
funds
money
are-
he's applying for every year
Well, the
too.
way it looks here, I mean, from 4 years now, I went from 36 to 25. It's going the wrong direction.
So my recommendation next year, ask for a lot more
Oh, I do. I usually
from the
ask.
grant, from the grant.
Yeah. Actually, I'll ask for a lot more from both places. What I normally do is, okay, for the, like I said, the first year that I worked here, I asked for 36 or 35. I got dropped down to 28. The second year, I believe I left it at 28 because I didn't think that they would do anything, give me any more. So, but then this past year that we're working on now, I asked for about 32, 34, I believe it is, if I remember correctly. Instead of doing that, they dropped me down to 25. So, and when I called and asked why, they told me that the federal government dropped them 300,000. So they had to cut everybody.
So next time ask for like 50 or 60.
Exactly, yeah,
And
exactly.
maybe they'll drop you down to 40.
Maybe.
So part of the
Maybe.
challenge in making a decision, Ken, is that we haven't really had a formal request for the opioid funds yet. And where's the money best spent? Is it spent best in education? Is it spent better in law enforcement to protect people on the street?
Mhm.
No, I think, for me, I'd like to understand it's a limited amount of money. What are my options? Where can my money best be spent?
Right, and I
Where can
agree.
the taxpayers' money best be spent?
Yeah.
I'd rather have it go to this than education, because education's not gonna work. I mean, never has, never will.
Well, this is kind of, this
So
is kind of like
I'd
an
rather have
education.
it go to
I
a
mean, it's an
program.
education to the individuals that are going through this
And even
program.
the times that it doesn't work, the seeds of recovery are planted. I mean, they may not bloom at that instance, but every time, they get resources and a little bit more information, a little more tools in the toolbox, the closer they are to it. For that one guy who, 3 times and he was out, it could be the 4th time that it takes. You just don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if he gets arrested again, and we'll have, I'm sure we'll meet and we'll decide whether or not to put him back into the program again.
All right. Thank you for the information
All right.
and you will, sounds, when will we consider this again? Are we going to talk about it at the next meeting or?
I can put it on the May 9th agenda. Do you want further discussion or do you want to try to take action?
Seems silly to me to have the money sitting there when it could have impact in the county. It doesn't do any good sitting in an account if we have a viable use for it.
If we're gonna go down that road, what I'd hope we'd consider is instead of making a multi-year commitment, go ahead and make a commitment now with the understanding that we're gonna look at, where are the best uses of the money? And it could be, this is always gonna,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of holding them up,
Yeah.
we can at least get that need taken care of, but it's with the understanding, Ken, that.
Right.
No,
I understand that. And also, that would also be a good reason for you guys to get an update as to how the program's going too. So a yearly update or yearly meeting would be a good idea.
And I think, as I view it, I think annually we would be looking at the opioid funding and making sure what we decided in the beginning is where it should be allocated each year.
Mm-hmm.
Make different modifications based on what's working and what's not,
Yes.
and what the new needs are. So Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Just one last thing.
Yeah.
Gary was surprised when you said 3 failed, 2 were successful,
Well, 3 were successful,
Three
4
successful,
failed, yeah.
4 no.
4 no. How does that look to, in your peer group throughout the state? Is that about average?
That's about, actually, it's about average, yes. When I talk to other individuals in my program here, and I have talked to a few, and actually sat into a couple of meetings with them, they have the same problems and issues that we do. It's everywhere in the state. I sat through a Zoom meeting with Grand Traverse County here about a year ago. And the issues they were talking about are the same issues we talk about every month. Okay, this one's doing good, this one's doing bad. You know, this one tested positive, or this one has this going on, or whatever. So same issues all over.
Very good. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Invite Dr. Custer to the podium.
Dr. Custer does have a presentation, and so I'm going to go ahead and share the screen because there are folks viewing our, oh yeah, we have people view every meeting.
I told Katie we'd have tens of.
You want me to do
people
it?
I can't see, is that?
Oh, it was in the packet?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Dr. Custer, not really here to ask for money, here to educate you guys. And hopefully, I'm going to be talking about MAT and jail programming. And hopefully you don't know too much because I have a lot to tell you. So it's really me just to tell you who I am, my background, give you some information on MAT, which is medication assisted treatment, and in jail program. I know there's been a lot of discussion in the county regarding that. You got the money floating around, ready to use it and stuff. So my presentation, my invite here is just to share what I do know, my background, my expertise on that. So please feel free to interrupt me with questions if you like. I think I have like 10 slides or so. So we'll get through this. So let me just get organized here.
And again, just for everyone's benefit, Dr. Custer is our doctor up in the jail, so she works closely with all of us.
You're out of Ludington, right?
Yes, so that's the next slide here, who I am. I think it's important to know, this is the first time we get to meet you all, so it's nice to be here. Yeah, so I do have the medical services at the jail since 2018, I believe, and also at Manistee. And my company is called All Access Care. And I say my company because, as was talked about earlier, I've been here all day, the safety net of having governmental money. So I think it's very important running your own business and knowing the revenue and expenses and making a financially sound decision. I love you guys' conversation you're having when it comes to spending money and understanding how that's being spent. Stuff that's one time versus, how this impacts. So I hope that my presentation on the medication assisted treatment also helps you guys make some good decision making as well. So I've been in practice since 2000, so 23 years. I'm actually board certified emergency medicine. So I grew up in emergency medicine. I worked there for half of my career. I came from Grand Rapids area, was a flight physician for Aeromed. So I used to do the exciting stuff, but I love this stuff. I founded All Access Care back in 2013. I left the ER then, and I left it for many different reasons. Opioids down in Ludington was horrible then. In fact, I personally moved up to Ludington and left my family in Grand Rapids because when I got to Ludington, I was stunned the amount of drugs in that area. And I'm sure you guys experienced that same thing. For a small little area, the drugs were horrible. And then Connection Point is our treatment and recovery program in Ludington. That's been running since 2013 or 15 as well. It's a nonprofit. And you'll see there we have a recovering living home called the Boone House that opened in 2019. So I do a lot in treatment and recovery. And of course, I've been doing correctional medicine for 10 years as well. So I got both sides of the story for you guys. And again, I want to understand, running my own business, I understand these are very tough decisions. You want to help, but you want your money going in the right place and you want it sustainable. So again, I'm here just to kind of share, I'll hear my other button, some of my expertise. So this slide is important to me. I want to kind of back up, like, why are we even talking about this? We all know there's an opioid crisis, but there's a history here that unless you're involved in it and grew up like I did, I trained in the 1990s. And so I saw everything in the ER, and here we are now. You guys got opioid money. Well, if I knew back in 1990 what Purdue Pharma was going to do, and I'll get there. So I'm going to talk about each of these kind of sentinel events in our history, because I don't want history repeating itself. And that's why it's important. And the decision you guys have at hand is that history doesn't repeat itself. So in 1980s, we had heroin on the street like crazy. And again, I was over in the Detroit area then. People come in, needles. And the whole thing back then was, HIV was big. Needles were all over the place. You guys remember those times, right? I don't know about up here, but in the bigger cities, that's what it was. So methadone, I'm going to talk about 3 drugs. So the first one is methadone, kind of came about to take care of that needle problem. Okay. It was to get heroin off the street. And I'll talk about, I'm not trying to get you guys a medical degree here, but I do want you guys to understand and be able to talk intelligently, because medication assisted treatment is for opioids only. And guess what? Today, is there still opioids out there? But meth. So we're talking something of history here. Not to say the meth that we don't see in the jail in the community doesn't still have its fentanyl, heroin, and opioids. But again, medication assisted treatment is only 3 medications that we have a choice to use, because they're talking about treatments. And that's methadone is the first one. So methadone came about in our world, our realm of treatment, because of heroin, to replace that. And I'll talk a little bit in the next slide about actually how that works and is it a good thing or bad thing. So then in 1990, the next sentinel event that kind of happened in the opioid world here is, we all know about Purdue Pharma and OxyContin. So OxyContin was marketed, all of our opioids are painkillers, right? That's what they are, as painkillers. And so the Purdue Pharmaceuticals, way back in the 1990s, came out and said, hey, terminally ill, we're just not doing enough for the people who are dying of cancer. They're in pain. They need to die with dignity. And that's how they marketed early. And again, I'm sharing this because there's a strong history, is it came out as that. And they knew the strength of these painkillers. But at the end of life, we just wanted our loved ones to be, non-suffering, right? Well, that changed very quickly. And you'll see how things have changed when it comes to pharmaceutical companies. And then all of a sudden, that smiley face on the bottom there, guys, I was working in the ER, and all of a sudden, we're no longer doing vital signs, heart rate, blood pressure, respiration. We have to ask, what's your smiley? Are you a 1, you're a 10? Everybody would tell us they're 11, right? Where'd that come from? We want to know where it came from. We as physicians were being told scorecards that we weren't treating your guys' pain when you came to the ER. Think about that. So we were being regulated to make sure we're giving pain medicines. So when you go home out of the ER, you're a 1. Sounds like the right thing to do, right? But guess what's happening today? We have other people now doing report cards on us. Like, people are coming into facilities and wanting to know how many addicts you have, and are you doing this, and are you doing that? And on the backside of all this is regulators and special interest and people who appear to be doing the right thing, but maybe not. And I say that because there's history here. So this is the few things I want you to know. The methadone I'll be talking about, because that is being marketed as one of the medications, MATs, medication assisted treatment. And then pharmaceutical, Purdue Pharma, the history behind that. That's why we have money today, because of the Sackler Fund family, all the lawsuits, class action lawsuit, right? So let me move on here. Any questions so far? Any clarification on that? So here's what MAT is defined, medication assisted treatment. So from the Department of Health and Human Services, the government, there's SAMHSA up in the right corner, substance abuse. You can probably read it better than I don't get into the acronyms, but they're the ones out there that tell us what the guidelines are. And there's 3 options that we can use for MAT. Okay, again, it's just opiates. This isn't cocaine. This isn't meth, ecstasy. It's only for opioid addiction. So methadone is one. The other one that you may or may not have heard of is Suboxone and naltrexone. They all act differently, and I'll go down to the bottom there and talk about the receptors. But because these are to replace opioid or help with opioid, they land on the opioid receptor. And the opioid receptor has 2 functions. One, when it's activated in the brain, it helps with pain. The other part of that pathway, the split, is it gives you what we call in medicine euphoria, a high. So I'm at the bottom there on the far left, I'm going to explain what these three each attach to one of those scenarios there. So methadone is what we call a full agonist. And I don't want to get too medicine-y with you guys, but that means it sits strongly on the receptor and acts just like heroin. Let me say that one more time. It sits on the receptor and acts just like heroin, morphine, or anything else. So everybody should be saying, so we're supposed to be giving methadone to people who methadone's like heroin. It is. It's just like heroin. Why are they recommending that? The history is it came about because of getting needles off the street. That's where it fell into the guidelines. So the middle thing there is Suboxone. Suboxone is a medication made up of 2 different medicines. We call it BUP for short. That is a mild opioid. So it's a mild pain reliever. And then it has naltrexone in it. And again, not to be too fancy, but naltrexone is what Narcan is. So if somebody shot up right here with heroin and EMS comes, they're going to give Narcan. Naltrexone and Narcan are the same. Narcan is a blocker. And all it means is when that morphine, heroin, and fentanyl, it sits on the receptor, you give Narcan and knocks it off. And then they start breathing again and become conscious. So Suboxone has a mild painkiller in it combined with a blocking agent. Very beneficial. Unlike methadone, why would you give somebody heroin, right? I think that's the mindset you should have. Suboxone could be utilized in certain areas. And then the final medication that the SAMHSA recommends is naltrexone. Naltrexone is like Narcan. It knocks it off. It protects an opioid from sitting on there. Good applications in what settings? Any questions on the mechanism of action? Because this is what we're being asked to, one not only recognize, define, but potentially choose how we're going to treat, if we decide to treat with medication assisted treatment. What option are we using here? Did I explain that well enough? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back and just go back and go over what's called the mechanisms of action. Let's talk about methadone / heroin, morphine, whatever. It's a powerful opioid. Okay. It activates both of those pathways. So not only does it give you pain relief, it gets you a little high euphoria. It's called a full agonist because both pathways are being activated. And so what is the application? As I already told you, it's intended just to take the needles off the street. We had methadone clinics. Here's another concept I want you guys to grab. When methadone came and everybody's like, oh, this is a great drug, just like everybody thinks Suboxone is a great drug. People would line up at methadone clinics to get handed their daily methadone, right? Not the case anymore. I can prescribe methadone. Any of your primary care can prescribe methadone. So we ruined something that probably was a good thing at the beginning by making accessible everything. And we're seeing that now with Suboxone too. Not enough Suboxone doctors. So let's give it to everybody. I'll speak on that again here in a little bit. So today, methadone is a drug of abuse. It's loosely prescribed. Anybody can kind of give it at a lower dose. It has its benefits, honestly, because we do have people who have chronic pain, and sometimes you can't have back surgeries, whatever the case is. I'm not saying it's a bad drug, but it, in my opinion, professional opinion, it doesn't really fit into medication-assisted treatment. any questions on that at all?
Exactly how would methadone treat an addict?
Good questions. Keeps them off the street and using a needle, I guess.
One
Because
drug
that's
for-
what I'm trying to explain to you. The
One drug for
mechanism-
another, basically.
Right, right.
Methadone is still addictive.
Yeah, methadone, you gotta come off methadone. Yeah. So these are guidelines from the government, Department of Health and Human Services, SAMHSA. They are telling us these three medications make up MAT. So that's why we scratch our heads sometimes and think, what makes sense here?
Well, methadone, that's not a hallucinogenic.
No, it's an opiate. These are all opioids.
We're like, you were comparing it to heroin. Isn't heroin
It's, nope, it's all opioids. These are all opioids I'm talking about. So meth is not an opioid. I can't help people with meth right now. We're talking only helping people with opioid addiction right now, right? So Suboxone, the two different medicines that has the Narcan in it, plus a little bit of a painkiller called Bupe. That comes in a film. It goes underneath the tongue and gets dissolved. It's not a shot or anything else, and it comes in dissolvable. So that's a combo. Interesting enough, that you can't get high from Suboxone. You'll have people convince you it is. Tell you what, I work with addiction a long time. Maybe the first time they take it, they get a little something. It has a ceiling effect. And again, I want you guys to get the right information because there's a lot of glorification of drugs out there. A lot of like, oh, I know this, know that. I've been doing this long enough that it is, I will tell you, it's being abused on the street now because it's readily hand out. And instead of people going into programs, when people are being prescribed 3 a day and they only need 2, there's enough to make a business out of it, unfortunately. So I'm going back to like history here. We should be doing the right thing. So it's application at Connection Point. I use Suboxone. I do MAT, medication assisted treatment with programming. I don't just give treatment. Okay. You talk the right words, recovery. If you're not in recovery, then you're in addiction. Addiction, I'm gonna kind of pick on you, like addict, kinda, but but you're diabetic too, right? You're always gonna be a diabetic. But let's say maybe you're in stable diabetes or in recovery. So the terminology I like to use, active addiction or recovery. And if you're not working on recovery, you're working on your addiction. And so why I'm taking the time to say that is because we can't just talk about medication or treatment without putting another program here. And you'll see that at the end of my wrap up here is I don't want to be a white coat drug dealer. Not going to be. Okay. And us doctors have fallen for that time and time again. That's why I tend to use black most of the time. I am not going to be a drug dealer. But misinformation from Purdue Pharma and all these people led us to believe. And today we being led to believe. You have to have that doubt out there. So I use this in Connection Point, but it's with programming. And speaking of the gentleman that was doing the court thing, these programs can be very, very helpful, but they have to be structured right. And to be able to offer something is great, but you don't have to offer medication. You have to have accountability. You have to have consequences. You have to have skin in the game. I would recommend you guys have them pay for their drug screens. Why are you guys paying for their drug screens? Right?
There could be a legitimate reason why.
Not to pay for their drug screens?
To subsidize the drugs.
Yeah, them pay for something. We do. We have all volunteers that come in our program, and I'll share our stats at the end here. Since we've been doing work up here, we bring people from jail who are interested in our Boone House and stuff. But when you just hand stuff out, they don't put as much intention into it. They have to have ownership, accountability, structure. They love structure. It sounds horrible to have them come in every day and drop. They like that. They have to have that. They have to have somebody overseeing that. Otherwise they wander and you get the 3 out of whatever is not a bad number. I think you can tweak that programming a little bit better, but those aren't bad numbers. So we use this with great success. So, oops, I'm sorry, I got 2 slides there. So the last medication with MAT, according to SAMHSA and the Department of Health and Human Services, is naltrexone. That typically is shot only, okay? It's a blocker. That's the Narcan. When it knocks it off. So no matter what happened, you give naltrexone, it will knock it off. So how does that look? It means like if I'm an addict and I start with naltrexone, I really can't go shoot up with a gram of heroin. It's not going to sit on my receptor. I just spent a whole bunch of money on street drugs that is going to give me no effect. The two risks why I don't like naltrexone is, one, it doesn't buy you into recovery. If I get a shot that's good for 1 month, I have no care. Where if I use Suboxone, you got to keep coming back because I just give a 1-week script. If I give you a shot, you're gone. You don't even care about recovery. The other bad thing about that is if you choose to, you can take enough drugs to knock that off the receptor, overdose, and die. I don't want that to happen either. So this has limited use, good use, but limited use. Okay. Again, it needs programming to it. Questions on that? Does it make sense?
Into active withdrawal.
Yes, exactly. So same thing when EMS comes on scene and they give Narcan, vomiting out, that's withdrawal. And again, we are using more Narcan than ever before because each one is like 2 milligrams. You street guys know that because fentanyl is in everything now. And fentanyl is 10 times, I don't even know the number, many times powerful than morphine, heroin. Fentanyl is the most powerful. So we just keep giving Narcan until they come out of it. All right. So here's the application. Methadone, full agonist. It's a controlled substance. It's a drug of abuse. It just doesn't fit for what we're talking about. Suboxone, it's the partial. Remember, you don't get a high. It's a controlled substance, though. So we're asking to put a controlled substance into the jail if this is what your consideration. So there's a lot of logistics to administering. We don't like heroin in jail, and we probably don't want any other controlled substance in jail because it has to be highly monitored. We wouldn't want the officers dispensing this, more staffing. This is where we get into the kind of the business behind all this. And we need a full program. And what I mean by a full program is the recovery part to this. So I will tell you one of the reasons why the court, what he's talking about, the court in our Boone houses is so successful is because these people are living in a safe environment. And what I mean by that is I can give anybody medication to prevent them from craving or using, but if they're couch surfing with their heroin friends, that's not a safe environment. Okay. You got triggers, all that. And so I'm not sure if we choose to put something in jail, because I know there's back in the general pop glorification of drugs. I mean, they talk about all their war stories back there. Not sure the mentality of getting somebody healthy. So that's another logistical application if we're considering something like that. And so finally, the last medication that is part of MAT is naltrexone. That's the blocking. It's not a controlled substance, so it potentially could fit into this setting. It's got each shot, last I knew, was like $1,000, a lot of expense. And then again, if we're just talking addiction, we have to talk recovery. Where does the programming come for all this? I personally feel if somebody needs to take a medication because of their disease, then shouldn't they do the recovery part just as often? So if you're dosing somebody twice a day, we shouldn't do counseling once a month or once every 2 weeks or whatever. We should offer that disease in its entirety. Like being a diabetic, if you're supposed to be taking your medicine and my primary care, when I was taking care of people, diabetics came in uncontrolled. I put them up in the ICU and an insulin drip. They go home, eat their donuts and candy bar and come back next week. And we're taking off the leg then, So that's what I'm saying. I can give you insulin drips, but it doesn't do, are we doing the right thing? That's what I want to share with you guys. So this is my perception, people. I'm sharing only where I come from, what I've experienced clinically. And I know there's lots of other opinions and being in the jail, some of the perception opinions come from, I reached out to these people. So the national sheriff, Mr. Thompson, had a article position, it was 30 some pages, that I read through very delicately because it had the same label on it, MAT. But there is, you have to look hard. They do talk about the programming, but they want everybody to hear the MAT. And then the correctional commissioner thing, same thing, is I sent him an email and he kind of went back and forth. I gave him some scenarios. His final answer was kind of depends, is kind of what I got from it. So I really believe MAT has to have programming with it. And you got to incorporate recovery. So what is recovery? Recovery is different. I can't even speak on it, to be honest with you. Recovery is different for everybody, but it's that regimented program, accountability. I will share with you, I think some of the things, unless you work intimately with this, with addicts, I think some of the things we fail to realize is who these people are. Yes, we call them diabetics, addicts. That's not what I mean. Is you ask most of these people, when did you start? And I started my own little survey recently since the first year, like what age you start, why? Because a lot of times it is us white coat drug dealers going like this. And, apologize for my colleagues and what have you, but a lot of times when they're 13, 14, they get started on this for recreation, marijuana, alcohol, and then it just escalates. But what I want to tell you, what I've learned through my practice and stuff, is we can see somebody who's like the 30-some-year-old that's been, clean and sober. They destroy their brain at age 13. So they don't really have the abilities for the most part, decision-making, lifestyle, all that. Some of them still struggle with, I'm supposed to go to work every day and all that. I mean, we can chuckle about it, but it's honestly true. Is like they've been doing drugs their whole life or institutionalized their whole life. There's a lot of this recovery that has to happen. It's not a matter of just getting them clean and sober. It's offering all these other resources. So when we talk about education and stuff, yeah, I can see where you're coming from, but they're not going to be successful if they're clean and healthy, but they don't realize, as an adult, I need to get out. They're still thinking as the 13-year-old, go get a work. And we tell people in Connection Point, you need a job. 2 weeks, you need a job. Otherwise, you need to go volunteer and stuff. So let me just kind of talk about Connection Point a little bit. Been doing it for 10 years. And again, success is hard to come by, but our program, I'm going to make 2 points. Our program has fallen off. When we started this, the peak of our program, we had 60 or 70 members in it because nobody else was doing it, right? Now you can go anywhere and get Suboxone, and you can go online and maybe Zoom once a month for it. Sad. Are we helping people? I don't believe so. But our numbers today still remain 85% of our people have been clean for over 5 years. 15% are at the 8 and 9 year mark. And what I mean by that, they come every single week to the program. They still come every single week to their Monday night, Monday morning, Wednesday night, Thursday night, whatever. This is their recovery. They're a diabetic and they know they have to do this to stay healthy. That's the type of program you want. Okay, so it's possible. It's very much possible. That's all I have. What questions do you have for me?
How would you implement this?
It's really what you guys want, honestly. I'm pretty broad. I can do it however you want. I'm telling you, there's a lot of logistics behind it, probably a lot of expense behind it. Here's another thought I'm going to throw out to you. I don't know where the concept came from, but I do know because I see all the inmates that come in and inmate assessments need to be seen within 2 weeks. A lot of them are on Suboxone already. But that should raise the question, what are we going to offer them in jail? Right? So Suboxone's only for opioids. And again, they're coming in on meth and other stuff. So the missing component, A plus B and C, is where's their recovery? If you're an addict, a lot of times you're just going to switch from one to another. So it doesn't matter if we offer them MAT. they need recovery.
So we were told at the last meeting that the real window where things seem to fall apart is they get in jail, they get access to Matt, they get access to probably some sort of recovery classes, information, but then there's a gap when they're released.
There's a
until
huge gap.
So how do we address that gap?
I don't know your outside resources. I've been challenged with that no matter what county I work with. I really do. Personally, I would like to see a stronger wraparound. So we even have tried like going ahead and administering something, but when is their next follow-up appointment? So I'm kind of scattered right now, but I'll give you an example. We have from either this county or Manistee County, an inmate who has been in the Boone House for I think 2 months now from their jail here. He was placed in jail, got out for 9 days, overdosed, went to rehab. I mean, 9-day gap where he had nothing to support him. I think that's where we're falling through. And I don't practice outside the jail walls. I do, but not in this county. So I think that's the questions you have to ask. So what can I do inside? It can help prepare them, but honest to God, they need the same day, next day, daily follow-up. I don't know if you guys have the resources for that.
So how are things funded? I mean, how is the Boone House funded today?
Well, it used to be all from whoever chose to come in there, volunteer. We only less than 6 months have partnered with FAN out of Detroit, Families Against Narcotics. And we're hoping to bring a chapter up here. I don't think you guys have a chapter. We don't have one in Ludington. Manistee doesn't.
No, we don't.
But they, FAN grew up at the same time we grew up. I remember driving over to Mount Pleasant, listening to one of the judges down there is the one who, female judge, not Thomas, I can't think of her last name, founded FAN. And because her daughter was a heroin addict. And I went and listened to her early on when we were starting and they were just starting, and they do Hope Not Handcuffs. They're phenomenal. And so they give scholarships out. And they're very much what we do. You got to have a job. You got to be this. So we will bring somebody from one of these jails who we've followed and are ready, because not everybody's ready. You're exactly right. Sometimes they got to hit and they still don't get it. And we've been doing this long enough to know how to screen, and we'll bring them down there. FAN will give them a 2-week scholarship. And then, so the last gentleman we had that was telling you about the 9-day overdose, he moved in on Friday. Monday, he had his interview. Wednesday, he had a job. That's how aggressive you need to be. They sit around, all this stuff doesn't work. So there are resources out there. It's just, it's a different set of programming, I think, than we're used to. They're not going to follow up. They don't have resources. They don't have a phone. They don't have vehicles. It's just, the program has to be very, very intense. And on the backside, since I've been doing Manistee and Benzie work, I've been reaching out to a lot of probation officers. Like, yeah, I'm willing to take them, but as soon as my simple words are compliant. As soon as they're not compliant with the program, I'm going to call you, probation officer, and say, you do something. And usually they get put back in jail. And that's fine with me. They're safer there than on the street. So not compliant might mean they didn't make curfew, or they didn't show up for their meetings, or it's week 3, 4, 5, and they still haven't gotten a job. Motivation, there's lots of factors that go into it, but as long as there's guidelines and accountability and a consequence, you can make the program work.
Okay, so now you provide medical assistant treatment for both Benzie and Manistee jails today?
I do, if they meet criteria. So
okay.
If my criteria is if you're coming in and you're already prescribed it on the out, belong to a program and you're in, not because of drugs or whatever else, no problem.
Okay, so then
Most of the people want off this stuff, by the way.
who funds that for the jails?
They use their own. They already have it.
They already have it when they come in.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I just wanted to add, we have a FAN chapter, and the prosecutor's office participates in that FAN chapter.
It's a great organization. So,
I have the mouse.
oh, yeah. So I don't probably have, I just wanted to present this and if you guys are eager to kind of talk more or come up with something more, I eager to present that. I just wanted to put the information out so you guys have understanding what MAT is, what it's not. Because there's a lot of talk out there. And I think sometimes we can get misled. I don't want to have a smiley face on my desk for MAT. I mean, we've done that, been there, done that, and we got misled.
Well, another question I have is, I mean, do you work with Catholic Human Services?
Yeah.
In Central Wellness?
Yeah, they're in the jail here as well.
Okay.
That they're on the outs, I mean, they're on the inside, but I would, on the outside, that's where we would expect the close follow-up in that.
Okay.
It's very doable. It just, I think you have to consider the logistics behind it, especially if it's one of the controlled substances that's going to be utilized, the expense, sustainability, all that. Because funding, I would hate for us to use funding that then, whatever period of time is gone. We don't have a means of continuing it. If that makes sense.
So I have to admit, I'm a little confused about how we're even having this discussion today. Dan, is this something that you wanted to get in front of us?
You guys asked last time to have more information from Dr. Custer regarding this MAP program, because we were talking about opioid, and that was one of the things specifically called out in the settlement agreements is MAP programs. And so after last meeting, I was asked to have Dr. Custer here to talk about the program and what that means.
Okay, and this is different than the discussion we've had regarding people that come in that need to be evaluated for maybe emotional issues. That's completely different program, right?
Yes, this is opioid specifically.
This is-
We're
okay.
trying to get ahead of it. I know Indiana, mandatory. We're just trying to get ahead of things. So when it's here, we're not.
So we've always had two components, our doctor in the jail and our resources, Catholic Human Services, Central Wellness also. But the problem we have putting together is the disconnect when they get out before they go to get more treatment. The recovery part. That's the disconnect, and that's why we're here to talk about how we can resolve that. Just to clarify the fan deal, I think that is dissolved at this point. Locally, not, of course, not
I don't know.
statewide or whatever, but locally, I think it's, so we don't have that to fall on for resources, help. As far as I know.
So you're kind of, and I'm saying this in a positive way, you're looking for someone to be able to grab their hand as they're exiting jail and make sure they don't have the opportunity to fail. Someone's there to be with them. Is that the goal?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Dr. Custer is willing and wants to help us, but our contract with her is specific. So when it comes to that bridging the gap with the help, if I'm wrong, let me know. Bridging the gap with the Suboxone or the whatever the actual drug is to treat this in between. We're all like looking at each other. How do we do it? Who pays for it? Essentially.
And your relationship with the jail now, is that do you provide medical services?
Yeah.
Okay.
So could you put a program together to bring as a proposal to this board about, because what I hear you saying is you want to marry the MAT with the recovery. And we have a gray area when our inmates are going back into the real world. And so this is what the program has to address. Can you develop some sort of proposal to meet that need?
So you're looking outside jail services then?
That's what I understand is where the issue lies.
Yeah.
If everybody else agrees, I mean, that's my understanding is what we've been told.
It's the exiting inmate.
The exiting inmate, that window between getting connected in a recovery program, that daily accountability and job and being on the MAT treatment where you're open to recovery And then that gray area where you go back to the real world and all the demons flood back in.
And that makes sense to me, because otherwise I'm looking at it as my liability lies in the jail. And if I'm prescribing something, we'll never see them again. Doesn't make sense. I don't even know if I can get liability coverage for something like that. So programming that is more of a wraparound, if that's what we're seeking, I could think through that with you. Yes.
No, I'm more interested in what you're thinking.
Okay.
You know what it takes to get people on the right path.
Yep.
And we want to support that.
I got it.
That's what these dollars are allocated for.
Yep.
And that's what we're looking for is the best use of those dollars.
Of the folks that get released from the jail, what percentage of them stay in the community? Do you have a sense?
I think it's kind of hard because my surveying that I've been done, I ask if they have a license in the vehicle, and most of them don't have a job or anything. Their addiction has taken them to back and forth in and out of the jail. So I think whatever we decide to do, I am more than willing to help. I just want to make sure we're going to be successful. That's all. I want to be part of something successful.
And I may be looking at this wrong, but now that I more clearly understand what we're talking about, you know, our responsibilities using taxpayer dollars is to Benzie County.
Mhm.
So if I've got somebody that has been incarcerated here, but they're headed back to Grand Rapids, do I really want to spend local dollars on them that they're leaving?
Well, I think you kind of do that right now, because when people come in jail and they go to rehab, they don't go to rehab here. They go to Sault Ste. Marie, Grand Rapids, all over the place, and then come back here because they are seated here. They have family here. But I think you also have to look at the recovery period is some time. Some can come back to their county of origin, some can't, depending on what that looks like as far as their ability to recover or need to get away. So I think that I understand your point, but once they get out of jail and go to rehab, they don't stay here locally anyways.
Do you know of a successful wraparound program that can kind of model for a community such as ours, a rural county?
Yeah, so to kind of share, my first correctional work was in Mason County. And so like we do for you guys here is we give what we call med pass to all the inmates. So the officers don't have to administer the meds. So what we did down in Mason County early on is we had our program, and then daily dosing was huge. And we would do that out of the jail 7 days a week. And that led itself to our success. We no longer have that contract, unfortunately, but something of that nature, I would say, because not only do you need the treatment, like I keep saying, and accountability, showing up, not showing up, probation officer didn't show up, missed a dose, who knows where his recovery is, put him back in jail type of thing. Something of that nature needs to be instituted. And we kind of loosely talked about having them come back through, but and we just had them come through at the waiting room in the jail. I mean, again, there's a perception there. Our Boone House is 3 blocks from the jail there. It worked wonderful. But unfortunately, we no longer had the contract the last couple of years on that. But that gave us great success. So there's lots of
A wraparound.
you need a Boone House. I think you do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And monitored and all that. You could do dosing there. You could do a lot of things there. You could package it. Again, one of my slides was, I get blamed for open-minded thinking. I'm out of the box thinker, but you could do something like that. There's nothing that tells you have to do it this way, that way.
And there's houses like that in Traverse City that are safe houses and those sorts of things. There was many of them in Traverse, really.
So the legal system POs would know where the house is at. They check on the houses and the environment anyways. They can have dosing there, all that. Yeah, it would be a good first start to partner that way.
With the responsibility.
At that place out on county line.
You guys need to
Yeah.
figure that out.
Responsibility of county.
I don't see it being.
Well, a lot of them is like
responsibility to
churches and
take care of people
nonprofits who
after
have
they
those
get out of
houses,
jail.
like Michael's Place
I don't
and
want
that
my
in
tax
Traverse
dollars
City.
personally to
It's
go
churches
there.
and nonprofits.
So what we did in Ludington is we have a very generous community and we have a lot of donors that bought the house or a nonprofit and they were not going to sustain it. We had to be responsible for sustaining it. So they bought Connection Point, the house, and it's sustained itself since 2019 because we asked people to get a job, to pay their weekly rent, all that, pay their drops, all that. So I don't think it would be necessarily ongoing county expense if you talk through it correctly. But it'd be a great asset because they would be seated here. You guys need employees just like we do, right? You can probably get some manufacturer, whatever. We have companies, and I went around in 2015 and talked to all of our employers, and they readily accept people from Connection Point. In fact, one of the guys that's been in the program for a while, he's like, I have no problem telling them I'm from Connection Point anymore because it doesn't matter. It's a positive thing. They will take you. It doesn't matter if you have felon. They know you're being monitored, and that same thing can be here. It can get back to your community. You can have stable people, have one or two companies who are willing to bring them on. We have House of Flavors down there that hire. We have Aluminum Extraction with Whitehall UACJ. We have a handful of employers who routinely was. That's why the guy who left here on Friday had an interview on Monday and a job on Wednesday, is because we have that connection, and you guys can very much make that happen as well.
Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, that gets us to our strategic plan discussion. We have gas in the tank.
After 7 hours, or should we push it to, I know I do have a tea time, but 7 hours of meetings is a long day.
And Katie's gotta get.
And
the
Katie's
boys,
gotta
so-
go. I say we move it. to
I
the
already
next week.
called Ben. He's getting them.
Oh, let's go to like 6 o'clock tonight then.
If we're not going to speak about it, can everyone please email me their thoughts and I will get it memorialized for the next meeting?
I've got 3 or 4 I want to communicate with you now.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Then the rest of you can.
I just don't want to put it out too much longer. So if you at least
I
give
mean,
me.
we're all supposed to come with 3 to 5 headings. Do we just want to go around the table and say what they were?
I took the time to do it.
I did too.
didn't. Oh, I did a couple the other day. They're sitting at home. I'd rather wait.
I only have one because I feel we as a county get too involved with so many different things when we should really focus on the business of the county. But the one goal that I have, and I think we learned some of it today, that the Maples have plenty of money. I think it's time we move on from the Maples and we look to privatize or sell it. We've learned over the years that when I've asked Mr. Loop what benefit we gain as taxpayers, there isn't any. We don't get priority over other people from different locations coming here. We pay the same amount as everybody else coming here. So what are my tax dollars, as a taxpayer, what are my tax dollars doing? I get no benefit of the Maples. And it's more expensive than private businesses doing the same thing. Why don't we look to sell that, take it off the taxpayers' backs because it does nothing for the taxpayers? It's a great service and we need it, but private companies could do it better and it wouldn't be on our backs as taxpayers. That's the goal that I have. Or
Tim,
that
you
it's
weren't
not
here.
3 or 4, but it's 1.
We have one. You weren't here for the last study session. Did
Correct.
you get the memo that this was the homework or no?
I did, I didn't see it.
Karen?
Looking at the, and I'll try to make it short, 5 minutes or less. Looking at the top 3 that we had from the survey earlier, broadband, affordable housing and childcare. Childcare is still at the top of my list. That is what our constituents told through that survey was one of the things. So childcare, infrastructure, I have been listening to a lot of people. I like the idea of the way we're doing sewer, part of the infrastructure. It's nothing glorious, but it's what we need for the growth here. But my infrastructure is, that I've heard was, why do people come here to Benzie County? Usually it's a beautiful place, natural resources, all this la-di-da, all this stuff. What's the basic to that? We got to protect our water. So water became a real big one. Broadband came up again with a lot of people. Infrastructure again. If we can think high in the sky, have a very rural community, but natural gas going everywhere. That's from the broader, those would be the big ones. Water, childcare, broadband.
Thank you.
Natural gas. All right.
So, and these are really the 10,000-foot views. I'm not looking at tasks related to them, okay? But we need to understand what our capital needs are on a rolling 5-year basis. Good news is we got a head start on that already. But I think that we need to make sure that that list is more comprehensive so that we're anticipating what our needs are instead of being surprised. I think there'd be some value in how we promote our community. And without, I don't want to get task oriented, but it was mentioned the last meeting, like maybe some kind of communication director or something. I'm trying to say promote our community because that could mean a lot of different things. It could mean EDC, it could mean parks, it could mean several. I think that we need to continue modernizing the county's technology. And I think that we need to manage economic growth.
And Chair, may I add something? Mine is grouped together, but I forgot to write it down. Cybersecurity.
What was your last one, Art? I'm sorry.
Manage economic growth.
Manage growth.
I like community
Okay,
coordinator.
Gary?
We'll stick with that community coordinator. I've been to a few meetings where we seem to have insufficient ambulance service in this county. I hate the thought of adding more to it. But that part is sticking out a lot to me because I'm watching Frankfurt's ambulance being used more and more. And we have county ambulance, and I know Thompsonville's used a lot, but it's also financially iffy. Best I can say about it. But it also goes into another county, which I don't know how you rectify that. 2 townships in Tennessee County that use Thompson. So that was one of my concerns. The other concern, and I hate to go to a county fire department. But after what's been happening,
What's been happening?
seems like every time I turn around, everybody, we had 2 fires in our area. One from Frankfurt, and it mainly just grass fires happened every spring. But one yesterday, we had an incident where another consumer's power pole decided to light the ground up. And I had one in my front yard basically 2-3 years ago. Don't know if that justifies doing it because these are just isolated incidents. But you see all the fire departments wanting more and more money. So are we going to get to the point that we need a county department? I don't know. Traverse City makes me scared.
Responding agency now to those calls.
Well, Frankfurt is in my township, Blaine. Flip over the road the other way and you're into Benzonia. They all have agreements where they respond to everybody. Just this stuff gets out of hand as far as expense. Not sure if it should be involved or not.
It's a local issue though, isn't it? With fire departments? Again, kind of what I mentioned, right? We always try and needle in as a county when.
It's usually county village or something that's gonna, or a local village.
Local millage.
But it's gonna be all over, so. mean, they're talking about doubling the millage.
Who is?
Well, Frankfurt, this is the response I get. I don't want to throw anybody over the bus, but you guys assess a bill and you're not collecting it because we assess up to. And if it's needed, we use it. If not, it's been staying about 0.75 or something like that. Now they're telling us you probably should assess $1.5 million. And then if you don't need it, bank it. I'm not in favor of that either. But and the reasoning was the community's getting older, more and more issues with people falling and on and on and on. It's just wanted to throw it out there to think about.
Okay, well, personally, most fire departments in the county rely on volunteer firefighters. And that model nationally is broken. It's not working well. And there might be some merit into a different solution here in the county. I know inland, they have what, how many mills are you guys paying for your fire service in inland? 4,
A lot.
5?
A lot.
Then you have other jurisdictions that don't pay hardly anything towards a fire millage. They might pay,
Yeah, I know it pays at least $1 million.
Hmm?
Arizona, I think, is talking going to 2.5. They did.
they did. Well, I mean, how much does Lake Township pay for a fire millage?
I don't know, on a mill, I know that the contractor run them about 80,000 a year.
That's and for Lake Township, that's about what, a half a mil or a quarter of a mil?
80,000 isn't much.
So that's what I'm getting at. I mean, if you go countywide, you're gonna have some, and it might have merit to it, but you're gonna have some communities crying foul where other ones like, yes, that way you can lower my cost.
Frankfurt's basing theirs on your calls, your community's calls, that kind of stuff, so. And on your tax base. Like, you guys, Lake Township uses Frankfurt, right? Anyway,
All right, I had 5, I called them goal, strategy, focus. I had 5 umbrellas, about 6 points under each one. Do you want me to read through it real quick?
Did you get the top one first and then?
All right, the top one is fiscal health. My
Fiscal?
fiscal health. So continued ARPA allocation. I want to create a finalized distribution to hand out to the community so we can tell them where we spent the money we were given. And then addressing the opioid marijuana dollars, Headley conversation, collective bargaining for unions, continued review of salary and hourly employees, and dealing with the fund balance. That's under fiscal health. My next point is space needs consideration. We need to focus on the expansion and reorganization, the campus addition, the lower level, remodel areas of the main floor. And then I also had the storage pole barn for county property. It seems silly to me. We're storing a lot of county property in places where it should be. My third one was assess and address staff and department development. This is where I had the community development idea for grant writing, administration, connectivity, land bank, brownfield TIF, EDC, Parks and Rec, facilitation of growth and opportunity for all levels of government. It could be recruitment and retention and an IT person. That was access and address staff and department development. My fourth umbrella was infrastructure development and expansion, broadband, natural gas, municipal water and sewer, and then the public safety tower. And my final one was enhance and protect natural resources of county, create a guide and inventory of park and rec features of the county, railroad point improvement. We have the HARP improvement and honor, trail paving, and the Point Betsy Lighthouse repair are all drop downs underneath that. So, and I can snapshot.
Just send me a picture of all that at the high level.
Okay, sorry. And I did that all over coffee at Bella's in Frankfurt, who has wonderful coffee.
Oh, good.
I think it's well thought through, and I'm glad you mentioned space needs, because when I think about capital needs, that's all encompassed. As our community grows, where are we putting staff? Where are we putting new services? Because There will be new services we don't even know about today that someday are gonna be banned.
I have all kinds of ideas. So Commissioner Markey, if you could shoot me an email with a couple ideas that you come up with over the next couple of days, and I'll follow up with Mr. Roloffs. And then I'll try to take out all your points and maybe boil it down, because many of you mentioned the community coordinator grant writer position. There's correlations between the capital needs, space needs. So I'll try to take out what y'all mean and put it all together.
The communication director is more of a part of the solution, not really what the goal is.
Good.
Okay.
I would open final public comment.
If you want to know some numbers for fire, I brought up 2021's numbers. Township to township. First view. Byron Township, 350,000. Benzonia Township, 240,000. Blaine, 35,000. Colfax, 26,000. Housing, Homestead, 78,000. Inland, 2. Zero.
Yeah.
Operating is $29,000 a year. That, 21,000. Weldon, 90,000. City of Spring,
Well, they did originally, I guess, if you want to, we used to take it out of the general fund, like Joyfield, and they did a millage. But,
varies so widely that you can't say.
right,
Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment.
So moved.
Mr. Chair.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.